Hyla stares down at the cold floor, her pale hair cascading over her face in the dim light of the cellar. She remains deathly silent as a voice calls out her name, demanding a final answer to a life-changing ultimatum. Surrounded by stern guards and a cold noble woman, Hyla realizes she is cornered with no hope of escape. Trembling on the floor, she reaches out in desperation toward her father, the only family she has left. With tears streaming down her face, she finally screams her submission to their cruel and calculated demands. Hyla accepts her grim fate, agreeing to become a sacrificial bride for the infamous Duke Alcott. Flashback to a few days prior, Hyla endures a harsh glare and a stinging lecture from her own father. Her father, a disheveled drunk, points a finger and barks orders at her without a shred of remorse. Despite his constant abuse, Hyla dutifully howled into the morning light to fulfill his selfish request for wine. She steps out of their dilapidated shack, the heavy wooden door slamming shut on her miserable home life. Walking through the busy market, Hyla overhears the local townspeople gossiping about a high-profile marriage. She pauses in her tracks, her eyes widening as she catches wind of the Priestley family's secret and scandalous plans. Two women walk past her, unaware that the girl in rags is listening to every word of their chatter. Hyla watches as a group of stern-faced soldiers marches through the crowded street, searching for someone. A soldier roughly shoves Hyla aside, showing absolutely no respect for a commoner in his path. The guards continue to clear the way with brute force, treating the townspeople like mere obstacles. From the shadows, a mysterious woman in a formal dress observes the chaos with a sharp and calculating gaze. The noblewoman suddenly strikes a gossiping peasant, asserting her dominance with a sharp and violent blow. The guards immediately seize the terrified townspeople, dragging them away for further questioning. The noblewoman and her officer discuss their urgent search for a specific girl with very distinctive features. Hyla hides behind a stone pillar, her heart racing as she tries to remain completely unseen. She keeps her head down and stays close to the wall, hoping her modest attire will help her blend in. Peering from her hiding spot, she realizes her own features might be exactly what the authorities are hunting for. She contemplates the extreme danger of her appearance, knowing her pale hair and red eyes are now a curse. Back in the present, the noblewoman lifts Hyla's chin with a whip, treating her like nothing more than livestock. The lady mocks Hyla, claiming her only value in this world her physical resemblance to a noble. Hyla stares back with tear-filled eyes, forced to endure the humiliating and cold comparison. The noblewoman inspects Hyla's hair, noting that while the eyes match, the color is entirely wrong for their scheme. She suddenly yanks Hyla's hair upward, causing the girl to cry out in a burst of sudden pain. The servants are ordered to immediately dye Hyla's hair to match the signature look of the Priestley family. Hyla sits helplessly on her knees as the transformation begins, her fate now tied to a dangerous lie. A servant grips her head firmly, preparing to apply the vibrant red dye that will change her life. The process is cold and clinical, as Hyla's original identity is literally washed away by the dye. The noblewoman stands over her, issuing a chilling warning about the deadly consequences of her failure. Now sporting bright red hair, Hyla keeps her gaze low to mask the true thoughts swirling in her mind. She is told to memorize a specific script, ensuring she can perfectly impersonate the young miss of the house. The noblewoman explains the treacherous and predatory nature of the Alcott family Hyla is about to join. She specifically warns Hyla about the Duke's second son, a man known for his terrifying and sharp perception. Hyla listens intently as she is told that one wrong move in that house could lead to a slow death. The noblewoman laughs, relishing the fact that Hyla will be the one jumping into the pit of fire. Hyla is roughly handled by the maids as they begin the process of preparing her for the journey. Escorted through the dark and gloomy halls, she is reminded that her father's survival depends on her performance. She looks back one last time, her eyes burning with a mixture of fear and hidden, growing resolve. Suddenly, Hyla's demeanor shifts entirely as she adjusts her earring with a newfound, elegant grace. She catches the head maid's wrist mid-motion, her grip like iron as she refuses to be bullied anymore. With a cold and confident smirk, she declares that she is now the young miss, and everyone must obey her. The maid recoils in absolute shock, realizing the pitiful girl from the slums was just a clever mask. Hyla closes her eyes and smiles, satisfied that her initial deception worked perfectly on her captors. Underneath the bridal veil, a new player enters the high-stakes game, ready to seize her own destiny. A lone carriage battles the freezing winds as it traverses the treacherous, snow-capped peaks. Inside, Hyla stretches her aching limbs, exhausted after days of relentless travel through the mountains. Her eyes suddenly dart toward a muffled struggle coming from the floor of the cabin. She looks down at her maid, bound and gagged, coldly advising the woman to stop wasting her remaining energy. Hyla offers a chilling ultimatum, stating the servant will only be freed once she agrees to play along with the impersonation. With a sharp gaze, Hyla reminds her captive that she possesses both the strength and the methods to enforce her will if necessary. Leaving the maid to her silent protests, Hyla turns her attention back to the classified documents in her hands. She studies the map of Blizzard City, the frozen seat of power for the notorious Alcott family. Rumors suggest the local populace is as savage and unforgiving as the blizzards that surround the kingdom. Her target, Duke Ralph Alcott, is whispered to be a lecherous old man who hoards beauty like a dragon hoards gold. Even more unsettling is the fate of his 3 previous wives, all of whom perished under highly mysterious circumstances. Now, their many children are locked in a ruthless shadow war for the Duke's inheritance and power. Hyla realizes she isn't just entering a marriage, she's stepping directly into a frozen hellhole. But she didn't endure the abuse of her foster father, just to walk straight into her own death. Recalling her secret preparations, she thinks of the lethal poison she secured before the journey began. She remembers carefully selecting the vial, knowing that a single drop could kill dozens of rats. Her plan is simple: eliminate the Duke on their wedding night and claim the status of a wealthy widow immediately. She briefly imagines a future of luxury and cake, a stark contrast to the confusion of her captive maid. Suddenly, a voice from outside breaks her concentration as they reach their destination. The driver announces that they have finally arrived at the gates of Blizzard City. Hyla cautiously pulls back the curtain to catch her first glimpse of the northern landscape. A magnificent white castle looms ahead, looking more like a crystalline fortress than a residence. But disaster strikes as the carriage wheel loses its grip on the icy mountain path. In a terrifying blur of motion, the entire transport careens off the cliffside and into the snowy abyss. Hyla awakens amidst the wreckage, her vision swimming as the biting cold seeps into her bones. A sharp, searing pain shoots through her leg, revealing a deep and bloody gash from the impact. She surveys the carnage of the crash, finding the bodies of the driver and maid motionless in the snow. Checking the maid's pulse confirms the grim reality that the woman did not survive the fall. Hyla realizes she is the sole survivor, free from those who would have dragged her down or exposed her. However, her freedom is short-lived as she realizes her injury makes escaping the ravine nearly impossible. The wreckage is buried deep in a desolate valley where her shouts for help will likely never be heard. Panic begins to set in as she wonders if she is destined to wait here alone until the end. Refusing to surrender to the cold, she reaches out to strip the warm cloak from the deceased maid. Wrapping herself in the stolen fur, she vows to fight for her life until her very last breath. The heavy snow continues to fall, threatening to bury the carriage and the evidence of the tragedy. Hyla huddles deep within the hood, desperately fighting the lethal urge to fall asleep in the sub-zero temperatures. Her strength finally fades, and her vision begins to blur as the darkness of the night takes over. Out of the blue, a mysterious figure descends from the heights above like a silent ghost. He stares down at her with a gaze as cold and piercing as the winter air itself. His boots crunch through the fresh snow as he approaches the nearly frozen girl. He tilts her head back, commanding her to stay awake as he assesses her condition. Hyla collapses into his arms, feeling a surge of relief as she realizes she has finally been saved. Without a word, the stranger lifts her up and carries her away from the site of the tragedy. A mysterious figure appears within a hazy, floral-filled vision. The man stares down coldly, demanding to know her identity. Hyla's eyes snap open as she suddenly regains consciousness. She gazes upward, realizing she has finally woken up. The stranger holds her near a fire to treat her hypothermia. Hyla processes the surreal rescue by this unknown man. She panics internally, fearing her secret mission is at risk. The man explains she was unconscious due to the extreme cold. Hyla listens while trying to clear clouded thoughts. She feels a surge of embarrassment over her fever-induced hallucinations. Regaining her composure, she thanks him for the rescue. She introduces herself using her false identity, Clara Priestley. She waits anxiously to see how he reacts to the name. He reveals his identity as Ulysses Alcott, the Duke's son. Hyla freezes, remembering warnings about his sharp, dangerous mind. She realizes this encounter makes her mission much harder. She wonders if he secretly orchestrated the carriage's fatal crash. Ulysses leans in close, his expression remaining entirely unreadable. Hyla maintains her facade with a look of feigned innocence. She claims it is lucky they met before her wedding. He questions her true motives for wanting to marry his father. His shadow looms over her, radiating a cold, intimidating energy. Hyla recoils as his skepticism becomes increasingly obvious. Ulysses stares her down and flatly calls her an imposter. He dismisses her, ordering her to leave the city immediately. Hyla challenges him, noting he hasn't moved to kill her. He turns away, offering a final, chilling ultimatum. She watches him leave, processing the failure of her disguise. Remaining in the snow, she refuses to give up her goal. Ulysses walks toward the light, leaving Hyla behind. He glances back with features reflecting deep, cold distrust. Hyla grabs his arm, boldly declaring she is staying with him. The story shifts back to a few days ago at the Alcott estate, where a brutal winter storm hammers against the stone walls. Inside the quiet manor, a young man gazes out at the frozen landscape through a frost-covered window. Suddenly, he jolts awake in a cold sweat, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and confusion. Gasping for air, he clutches his face as he tries to reconcile his surroundings with his final memories of a painful death. He stares down at his trembling hands, shocked to find them youthful and free from the ravages of his former illness. A servant's voice cuts through his panic, announcing that the Duke expects him to prepare a banquet for the arrival of a guest from Lion City. Ulysses brushes a hand over his face, the name of the visitor triggering a flood of bitter memories. It is then he realizes the impossible has happened. He has been reborn at the age of 20. He reflects on his past, recalling how his mother came from a fallen noble family and was never truly accepted. After her passing, he was left as a lonely child standing over her grave, abandoned by a father who didn't care. He grew up as a phantom in his own home, neglected by the Duke in favor of a new, younger wife. Refusing to be broken, Ulysses spent his youth buried in books, teaching himself the mechanics of power. He trained relentlessly with the sword, forging his body into a weapon to ensure his survival in the cutthroat city. Every move he made was a calculated play on a mental chessboard, aimed at seizing the head of the family. In his previous life, he was a master of the game, his ascension seemingly guaranteed by his own brilliance. That was until Clara Priestley entered the picture, a woman who initially tried to flee the Alcott family at any cost. After her escape attempts failed, she underwent a chilling transformation and accepted her grim reality. She became a ruthless player in the family struggle, her eyes burning with a newfound, lethal ambition. Using her position to manipulate the Duke, she sought to become the true power behind the throne of Blizzard City. Ulysses eventually defeated those who coveted his position, but Clara dealt him a poisoned blow that led to his death at 40. Now, looking at the woman before him, he remembers the face of the enemy who once ended him. He stares into his own reflection, swearing that in this life, he will never let her infiltrate his home again. Back in the present, Sheila clings to his arm, desperately insisting that she wants to live by his side. Ulysses stares down at her with cold, calculating eyes, entirely unmoved by her plea. Sheila doubles down on her performance, claiming she only agreed to the marriage because of her long-standing admiration for him. He forcefully pulls away, his patience thinning as he demands she finally admit to being an imposter. He turns his back on her, privately cursing the moment of soft-heartedness that led him to save her life. He stops and looks back at her feet, questioning if she would still stay if she knew the truth. He reveals his dark secret, admitting that he was the one who strategically arranged for her carriage to fall into the snow trap. Sheila isn't deterred, challenging him to explain why he bothered rescuing her if his goal was her demise. Ulysses recalls the moment he pulled her from the cold, noting that this version of her felt nothing like the woman from his memories. A sharp, dangerous smile crosses his face as he decides to change his tactics. Sheila looks up, caught in his intense gaze as the power dynamic between them reaches a boiling point. He pulls her into a firm hold, deciding to keep this mysterious woman close to uncover the truth behind her arrival. Ulysses leans in close, testing her resolve with a calculated and predatory smirk. Sheila finds herself caught in the intense gaze of a man whose striking features are matched only by his dangerous reputation. Despite her racing heart, she leans forward, fully committed to this high-stakes game of deception. She maintains a strictly formal tone, acknowledging his status, while carefully treading the line of their arrangement. Playing her part to the end, she feigns concern over how her presence might cause him trouble with the Duke. Ulysses closes the distance once more, his eyes cold as he challenges her to maintain this elaborate act. He suddenly pulls her into a firm embrace, testing her reaction with an unexpected display of boldness. She quickly pulls back, her face flushed with a mix of shock and indignation at his sudden proximity. Ulysses stands his ground, questioning if she's already regretting her decision before the mission even begins. A heavy, tense silence falls between the two as they stand together in the chilling mountain air. He observes her calloused hands, realizing she couldn't possibly be the noble lady she claims to be. His gaze hardens, frustrated that he went through the trouble of saving someone so intent on jumping into a trap. With a dismissive gesture, he makes it clear that he will no longer be responsible for her survival. He turns his back on her, leaving Sheila stunned by his sudden and cold change in demeanor. He begins to stride away into the snowy landscape, leaving her to fend for herself in the wilderness. Sheila quickly chases after him, insisting that they are both heading toward the same destination regardless. The two continue their grueling journey through the deep snow, the distance between them growing as he picks up the pace. Sheila struggles to keep her footing, the harsh conditions and heavy dress taking a visible toll on her strength. She realizes that if she doesn't think of something fast, she'll be left behind to freeze. Desperate to close the gap, she calls out his name, her voice barely carrying through the biting wind. She lunges forward and clings to his leg, pleading for him not to abandon her in the mountains. Sheila refuses to let go of her only lifeline, knowing her survival depends entirely on staying by his side. Ulysses looks down at her with pure exasperation, demanding that she release her grip immediately. He groans in frustration, realizing she is far more persistent and shameless than he ever anticipated. Finally relenting, he orders her to let go so he can fulfill his promise to take her back. She looks up with a weary and faint smile, admitting that she has absolutely no strength left to walk. Ulysses reaches down, grabbing her cloak to help the exhausted woman off the frozen ground. He efficiently hoists her onto his back, choosing the most practical way to transport her through the heavy drifts. As they approach the city, he reminds her of the specific story she must tell to maintain their cover. A dark thought crosses his mind, knowing he can easily dispose of her later if she interferes with his plans. They finally arrive at the imposing and frost-covered gates of Duke Alcott's sprawling estate. Ulysses commands the guard to immediately inform his father that their expected guest has arrived. The heavy, ornate doors of the main hall stand closed, guarding the secrets of the Duke's inner sanctum. The guards swing the doors wide, revealing a grand and brightly lit interior filled with the elite. Ulysses leads Sheila into the room, their presence immediately commanding the attention of the gathered nobles. Whispers erupt among the crowd as they scrutinize the travel-worn, young woman standing beside the young master. The Duke's eldest children, Eunice and Eugene, watch the newcomers with judgmental and suspicious glares. Enoch, the Duke's third son, looks on silently from the sidelines with a weary and uninterested expression. At the far end of the hall, they find Duke Ralph on his throne, preoccupied with the lavish service of his attendants. Hyla observes the Duke's behavior with sharp eyes, her suspicion of his true, lecherous character deepening instantly. The Duke turns his flushed gaze toward them, acknowledging his son's presence with a nod. Hyla performs a graceful and practiced bow, formally introducing herself to the master of Blizzard City. The Duke's eyes light up with predatory interest as he hears the name of his intended guest. With a wide, welcoming grin, the Duke beckons her forward, inviting her to take a seat directly by his side. Duke Ralph motions toward the seat of honor, commanding Hyla to join him at the head of the table. Maintaining a professional distance, Ulysses and Hyla move across the grand hall toward the waiting Duke. From across the table, Eunice and Eugene whisper their doubts about this newcomer's ability to handle the pressure. The atmosphere at the table remains thick with tension as the Alcott siblings watch Hyla's every move. Eugene looks over at his siblings, silently questioning if they are truly prepared for this new addition to the family. Ulysses catches Eunice's eye, sensing her eagerness to see the potential stepmother fail. A subtle, knowing smirk plays on Ulysses' lips as he anticipates the upcoming clash of wits. Surrounded by the metaphorical thorns of the estate, Hyla steels herself for the performance of a lifetime. Hyla is momentarily caught off guard by Ulysses' effortless composure in such a hostile environment. She quickly snaps out of her trance, realizing she cannot afford even a second of hesitation. With a graceful curtsy, Hyla masks her internal panic by showering the Duke's palace with exaggerated praise. Eunice and Eugene exchange a look of genuine surprise at Hyla's brazen confidence. Ulysses keeps a sharp eye on the proceedings, waiting to see how far Hyla can push her luck. Hyla takes a firm step forward, closing the distance between herself and the Duke. She settles into the seat beside Duke Ralph, maintaining a perfect facade of sweet compliance. When the Duke reaches out, Hyla flinches away with a sharp gasp, causing him to recoil in shock. The siblings watch with predatory amusement, convinced that Hyla has finally cracked under the strain. The Duke's expression darkens as he reaches for a sharp fruit knife on the platter before him. He holds the blade with a chilling stillness, asking if her reaction was born of disgust. Ulysses watches the confrontation, initially believing Hyla's mask has slipped too early. Thinking fast, Hyla claims her sudden movement was merely due to the discomfort of her cycle. The Duke remains skeptical, the knife still gripped firmly in his hand as he evaluates her story. Hyla continues her technical explanation, hoping to exploit the Duke's superstitious nature to buy herself time. The Duke uses his finger to tilt her chin upward, searching for any sign of a lie in her eyes. He demands immediate proof of her condition, refusing to take her word at face value. Eugene considers intervening, wondering if the situation has escalated beyond Hyla's control. Hyla casts a desperate glance toward Ulysses, searching for any hint of support. Ulysses offers no help, his gaze remaining cold and detached as he watches her struggle. Instead of assisting, he looks on with a mocking glint, clearly enjoying her desperation. Pushed to the brink, Hyla boldly offers to provide the evidence the Duke demands. She presents a cloth stained with what appears to be proof, though it's actually blood from her hidden leg wound. The siblings recoil in visceral shock, completely unprepared for such a direct display. Ulysses is forced to acknowledge Hyla's ruthless dedication to maintaining her cover. Reeling from the sight, the Duke quickly waves her away, his superstitious fears taking hold. Hyla finally breathes a sigh of relief as the Duke turns his attention back to the other guests. She takes the opportunity to distance herself, moving away from the immediate reach of the Duke. Beneath her skirt, the bandages on her injured leg continue to serve as her secret weapon. Trying to regain her strength, Hyla focuses on the meal placed before her. She is genuinely impressed by the quality of the food, finding it far superior to the rations in Blizzard City. Ulysses is stunned to see her eating with such a hearty appetite, so soon after a near disaster. The Duke commands his children to raise their glasses in a toast to their future stepmother. Ulysses and Enoch move in sync, preparing to follow their father's orders. Eunice and Eugene prepare to join the toast, though their expressions remain wary. Eunice raises her glass high, formally introducing herself as the eldest daughter. Hyla returns the gesture with a polite smile, playing the role of the gracious guest. The formal introductions continue as the family gathers around the table. Eugene introduces himself as the eldest son, offering a surprisingly civil greeting. Hyla takes a sip of her drink, silently cataloging Eugene as a potential person of interest. Ulysses finally approaches with his own glass, his professional mask firmly back in place. Leaning in close, Ulysses offers a chillingly sarcastic congratulations on her successful infiltration. Hyla confronts Ulysses, demanding to know exactly why he considers her such a massive nuisance to the family. Her eyes widen in genuine confusion as she waits for him to explain his cryptic warning. Duke Ralph interrupts the tension, casually sipping his wine while questioning why the two of them arrived at the estate together. Hyla quickly weaves a lie about her carriage being stuck in a snowdrift, while Ulysses maintains a perfectly professional and stoic demeanor. The Duke lets out a satisfied chuckle, seemingly amused by the convenient timing of the rescue. Ulysses remains silent, hiding his true thoughts behind a mask of cold, calculated indifference. Sheila is visibly taken aback when the conversation shifts to the dramatic cliché of a hero saving a beauty. Ulysses explains with clinical detachment that he simply couldn't stand by and allow his father's future wife to perish in the cold. Ralph lounges back in his chair, boasting about his supposed generosity while keeping a woman close to his side. He uses a plate of steak and eggs to illustrate his twisted philosophy on sharing resources within the household. The Duke makes it clear that he always takes the first bite, leaving only the leftovers for everyone else to fight over. Ulysses looks away, confirming that he is well aware of his father's archaic and selfish rules regarding authority. A dark metaphor flashes through Sheila's mind as she imagines the family tearing apart their previous guests like vultures at a feast. Disgust washes over Sheila as she fully realizes the depravity of the man she is intended to marry. The third son, Enoch, is introduced, appearing far more timid and fragile than his older siblings. Sheila offers a polite greeting, trying to gauge the temperament of this shy and nervous young man. Enoch avoids direct eye contact, hurriedly sipping his drink as the social pressure of the dinner mounts. He stammers through a reply, leaving Sheila to wonder if he is truly as innocent as he appears to be. She notes to herself that Enoch seems far too sheltered to be part of his father's cruel games. Turning her attention to Eugene, she observes the eldest son's polished and impeccably polite behavior during the meal. Her gaze shifts back to Ulysses, the only one who seems to truly understand the gravity of the Duke's ruthlessness. Sheila's internal alarm bells scream as she realizes the toxic and competitive dynamic between the Duke and his heirs. The sheer absurdity of the family's behavior leaves Sheila feeling completely out of her depth in this den of vipers. Half an hour later, a drunken and satisfied Ralph decides he has had enough and prepares to retire for the night. Sheila maintains her professional facade, offering a respectful bow as the master of the house departs. Seizing the first available opportunity, Ulysses immediately announces his own departure, without a second thought for the others. Sheila watches him leave, frustrated by his blatant lack of courtesy toward the remaining guests at the table. Ulysses briefly addresses Eugene, stating he is finished with the meal before turning his back on the room. Determined not to let him get away, Sheila resolves to catch up and corner him for the answers she desperately needs. She excuses herself from the table, claiming she needs to write a letter home to assure her family of her safe arrival. The remaining siblings watch her go, their expressions unreadable as the formal dinner finally concludes. Outside the manor, the moon hangs high over the frozen and desolate landscape of the Alcott estate. Sheila finally catches up to Ulysses in the dimly lit corridor, calling out to him with a sense of urgency. Ulysses continues walking, completely ignoring her presence, as if she were nothing more than a ghost in the hall. Refusing to be brushed off, Sheila reaches out and firmly grabs his arm to force a face-to-face confrontation. She braces herself, knowing she has to play a dangerous psychological game to get him to finally cooperate. Lowering her voice, she whispers a daring and calculated proposition that catches him off guard. She puts on a dramatic display of fake devotion, threatening to create a scandal that would link their fates together forever. Ulysses pauses, calculating how he can turn this unexpected boldness to his own tactical advantage. He tells her to let go of his sleeve, finally agreeing to give her the information she's been seeking. As they walk, Ulysses bluntly describes his father as a pathetic drunk who treats his wives and children like dirt. He leans in close to explain that her arrival as a representative of the priestly family has shifted the balance of power. He warns her that the heirs are terrified she will manipulate the Duke and become the true power in the family. The siblings are shown in portraits of suspicion, each one weighing whether to win her over or eliminate her entirely. Sheila stands frozen, finally realizing that she has walked into a lethal trap, where every family member is a potential enemy. Ulysses towers over Sheila, demanding to know if she'll join the siblings or side with him. He maintains a cold, analytical gaze, clearly weighing her potential as a chess piece. He dismisses her worth entirely, claiming a mere fake holds no strategic value for his plans. Sheila realized that simply removing the Duke won't be enough to survive the Vipers in this manner. Despite his arrogance, she knows securing an alliance with an heir is her only path to the inheritance. She attempts to negotiate, reminding him that the real Clara Priestley is still backing her from the shadows. Ulysses leans in with a piercing look, questioning the validity of her supposed support system. He drops a bombshell, revealing the maid who died was actually a spy sent by the real Clara to monitor her. Somewhere distant, the true Clara Priestley prepares to send a replacement to tighten the noose around Sheila's neck. He warns her that her family in Lion City is at risk if she doesn't handle the coming interrogation perfectly. The two stand in a tense silence, the gravity of their mutual predicament finally sinking in. Suddenly, Ulysses' expression shifts as he commands her to come closer. He pulls her into the shadows of the garden, shielding her presence as the Duke approaches a staff member nearby. Maintaining a firm grip to ensure her silence, he whispers that Ralph is right outside. Duke Ralph corners a terrified maid, using his authority to demand her compliance in a strictly unprofessional display. The Duke ignores her pleas, callously threatening her husband's livelihood to get what he wants. Watching from the darkness, Hyla feels a surge of disgust at the old man's predatory behavior toward the staff. She expects Ulysses to remain indifferent to the staff's plight, given his cynical nature. However, the young heir prepares to take matters into his own hands with a subtle intervention. A well-aimed projectile snaps a branch, creating a sharp noise that startles the Duke. Distracted and paranoid, Ralph shouts in frustration at the sudden interruption. The maid takes the opportunity to flee while the Duke grumbles about his ruined moment. Hyla is stunned to see a flicker of conscience in the man she thought was heartless. She struggles slightly, wondering why he is still maintaining such a restrictive hold on her. Ulysses abruptly releases her, his composure momentarily breaking as he turns away. Hyla is left reeling by his rapid mood swings, calling out to him as he prepares to depart. He walks away without looking back, reiterating his refusal to form an official alliance. Their brief moment of cooperation ends as he disappears into the snowy night. Hyla stands alone, trying to make sense of the erratic man who just saved her from discovery. Exhaustion begins to set in, and she decides she must recover her strength before facing the next trial. As she makes her way back, a shadow lurks behind a pillar, watching her every move. Enoch steps into the light, causing Hyla to jump in surprise. The young man quickly apologizes, his timid nature contrasting sharply with his brother's. He delivers an urgent warning. The Duke is drunk and violently searching for his new wife. Hyla prepares herself for the confrontation, knowing Ralph's temper is a dangerous fuse. Back in the banquet hall, a wine glass shatters against the floor as the Duke's rage boils over. Ralph's face is flushed with alcohol and fury as he demands Clara's presence. Enoch cautiously leads Hyla into the room to face the patriarch's wrath. The Duke's eyes lock onto her, a predatory smirk forming as he realizes his target has finally arrived. Hyla closes her eyes and takes a steadying breath, asking the Duke exactly what he requires of her. A flushed and heavily intoxicated Ralph grabs her waist, demanding his new bride escort him back to his chambers. Panic flares in Hyla's eyes as she scans the room, desperately hoping for someone to intervene in this nightmare. Young Enoch watches the scene unfold with a pained, helpless expression, unable to challenge his father's authority. The other siblings coldly avert their gazes, making it clear that she is entirely on her own in this den of lions. Realizing there is no escape, Hyla lowers her head and masks her disgust with a veil of forced submission. She maintains a professional composure, gently telling the Duke that he has overindulged and needs to rest. Ralph leans his full, drunken weight onto her shoulder as she begins the grueling task of guiding him down the hall. The stepdaughter watches them leave with a calculating stare, wondering if Hyla's calm exterior is a sign of strength or a dangerous hidden agenda. Once inside the private quarters, the Duke stumbles violently, nearly pulling Hyla down with him as he loses his footing. He collapses onto the furniture and praises her beauty, while Hyla quickly suggests more wine to keep him distracted. Ralph's face lights up with a sloppy grin as he eagerly orders her to bring the bottle at once. Hyla stares at the alcohol with a cold, focused intensity, seeing it as her only weapon to end this encounter. She pours a massive, concentrated dose of the potent liquor into his glass, determined to knock him out for the night. Forcing a pleasant smile, she holds the drink out to him and encourages him to finish it all. Ralph greedily gulps down the liquid, completely unaware of the trap his bride has set for him. The heavy alcohol hits his system instantly, causing his eyes to glaze over as his consciousness begins to slip away. The glass slips from his hand and shatters on the floor as the Duke finally falls into a deep, comatose sleep. Hyla looks down at the sleeping patriarch with pure venom, wishing she could eliminate the threat permanently right now. Outside in the corridor, a maid stands frozen, startled by the sudden silence coming from within the Duke's room. Hyla swings the door open and immediately confronts the woman, calling her out as a spy sent to monitor her movements. She demands to know the location of her guest room, wanting to distance herself from the Duke as quickly as possible. With a sharp, dismissive smile, she instructs the spy to handle the unconscious Duke while she departs. Walking alone through the cold, moonlit hallways, Hyla feels the crushing isolation of her precarious position. She realizes her only hope for survival is to somehow force Ulysses into a formal alliance. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness hits her, and she clutches her throat as a strange heat begins to radiate through her body. Her vision blurs into a chaotic mess of light and shadow, and she gasps as her heart begins to race uncontrollably. Hyla leans against the wall in a cold sweat, the horrifying realization dawning on her that she has been drugged. She recalls the sinister effects of slum-made substances designed to strip a person of their dignity and self-control. Knowing her time is running out, she realizes she must find a trustworthy medical solution before the drug fully takes hold. Her mind races through the Alcott brothers, weighing the risks of approaching any of them in this vulnerable state. She decides that Ulysses is her only viable option and resolves to reach his quarters at any cost. Panting heavily, she stumbles through the labyrinthine manor, desperately trying to remember the path to Ulysses' room. Her legs give out, and she collapses forward, her hands searching for anything to steady her failing frame. She is caught by Enoch, who looks at her with genuine concern and asks if she is feeling unwell. Enoch tries to guide her toward medical help, But Hyla struggles against him, her body growing weaker by the second. The eldest son suddenly appears in the hallway, his presence commanding immediate attention as he intercepts the pair. He stares them down with a piercing, judgmental gaze, demanding an explanation for their late-night encounter. Hyla manages to pull herself away, insisting with a strained voice that she is simply returning to her room. Enoch tries to follow her out of concern, but his brother's stern voice stops him dead in his tracks. The eldest brother reminds Enoch that Hyla is their father's wife and that he has no right to interfere with her. He delivers a final, chilling warning to Enoch to mind his own business and stay in his place. Inside his private bath, a shirtless Ulysses remains focused on the political chessboard, planning his next move against the imposter. He vividly remembers the moment he had her at his mercy in the snow, questioning his decision to let her live. He knows that now that they are in the city, her presence represents a variable he can no longer easily control. Ulysses splashes freezing water onto his face, attempting to wash away the distracting thoughts of the mysterious woman. He is suddenly broken from his trance by the sound of the curtains rustling as someone enters his private sanctuary. Hyla stumbles into the room, her face flushed with fever as she collapses and begs Ulysses for his help. Hyla hides under the fabric, whimpering in pain as the poison's heat begins to overwhelm her senses. She looks up with a flushed face and glazed eyes, completely consumed by the drug's effects. Ulysses stands before her in a loose robe, his calm presence a sharp contrast to her desperate state. Her vision blurs as she fixates on him, her mind racing for any way to quench the internal fire. He turns to walk away, but she realizes she cannot let her only source of help disappear. She reaches out with trembling hands, clutching at his open robe to keep him from leaving. Driven by the fever, she begs him to remove the garment, unable to bear the stifling heat any longer. Tears beat in her eyes as she gasps, the internal suffering becoming an unbearable physical weight. Ulysses stares down at her, clinically analyzing the situation and realizing someone used a dangerous substance to frame her. She slumps against him, her strength failing as the poison takes full control of her motor skills. He lifts her chin, warning her sternly that she will regret this desperate gamble once she finally sobers up. In her delirium, she pulls him closer, seeking the coldness of his skin to quell her rising temperature. She whispers a dazed challenge, questioning why he remains so stoic in the face of her distress. Ulysses finally decides to take action, announcing his plan to detoxify her system immediately. Hyla closes her eyes, resigned to whatever treatment will end this agonizing sensation. He scoops her up without hesitation, carrying her toward the large, cold bath in his quarters. The sudden shock of ice-cold water makes her cry out as he drops her directly into the tub. She sits there shivering, her tiny frame looking soaked and pathetic in the freezing liquid. When she tries to scramble out, he firmly pushes her head back down to keep her submerged. She splashes and protests against the cold, but he refuses to let her escape the necessary treatment. A minute later, she is completely drained of energy, looking like a helpless, clawless kitten in the water. Despite the ice, she still feels a confusing, painful mix of extreme cold and internal heat. She reaches out to grab his hand, pleading for him to stay and help her through the remaining suffering. Suddenly, her body gives out and she collapses forward into his arms. Ulysses catches her, struck by how truly fragile and small she seems when she isn't acting. He decides it's too risky to send her back yet, so he carries her toward his own bed. As he lays her down, he notices a dark, bloody stain seeping through the fabric of her dress. He checks her temperature first, noting that the dangerous fever is finally beginning to break. His gaze then shifts to the injury on her leg, realizing she's been hiding a physical wound this entire time. The wound is deep and nasty, a stark contrast to her otherwise delicate appearance. He scoffs at the mess she's in, though his clinical focus remains sharp as he prepares to help. He reaches for a first aid kit, preparing to treat the injury with professional, technical efficiency. Sitting by her side, he begins the delicate process of cleaning the blood away from her skin. The injury looks even more severe up close, requiring immediate and careful medical attention. Hyla reacts in her sleep, her face contorting with a pained expression as the treatment begins. He tells her to stay still, maintaining his grip to finish the bandage properly. As he works, he finds himself frustrated by how much trouble this mysterious woman continues to cause. Suddenly, she cries out a heartbreaking plea, begging an imaginary figure not to hit her. She cowers away in her sleep, trembling as if reliving a terrifying and violent memory. Ulysses pauses, realizing for the first time that she likely suffered under a cruel and unreliable father. He gently places a hand on her head, trying to soothe her nightmare with a rare moment of kindness. Her fear persists, her face twisted in a silent scream as she tries to hide from her past. She vividly remembers hiding in the dark stables as a child, fearing the silhouette of the man searching for her. In her mind, a comforting hand reaches out to the young, crying version of herself to offer protection. Ulysses looks down at the sleeping woman, his expression softening as the truth of her trauma sinks in. As he tries to pull away, she suddenly grabs his sleeve with all her remaining strength, begging him not to leave her alone. Ulysses tries to pull away, but the feverish Sheila clings to him with surprising strength. Tears stream down her face as she cries out for her mother, begging her not to be left behind. Ulysses watches her, his gaze softening as he realizes the depth of her hidden pain. The sight triggers a cold memory of his own past, standing abandoned in a heavy downpour. Resigned to his fate, he settles in for an exhausting night of monitoring her condition. The morning sun finally breaks through, finding Sheila slowly blinking back into consciousness. She sits up and stretches, the exhaustion of the night still weighing heavily on her. Shock jolts through her when she realizes Ulysses stayed by her side the entire time. Memories of her desperate pleas and physical proximity from the night before flood her mind with embarrassment. She panics, terrified that she may have let her guard down and revealed her secrets while delirious. Clutched in frustration, she tries to piece together her fragmented memories of the night. Her attention shifts to her leg, discovering that the wound has been expertly cleaned and bandaged. She observes the resting Ulysses, wondering if the rumors of his cold nature were exaggerated. Driven by curiosity, she leans closer to study the man who has shown her unexpected kindness. She ponders the strategic challenge of how one could ever hope to influence someone so guarded. She remains transfixed by his composed features, trying to decipher the enigma before her. Suddenly, Ulysses snaps awake and seizes her hand, his reflexes as sharp as ever. She maintains her composure, flashing a bright, innocent smile to mask her true intentions. Ulysses doesn't break eye contact, pulling her into his personal space to assert his dominance. He lays out a cold ultimatum. If she can survive the wedding to Ralph, he might consider a formal alliance. Sensing an opportunity, Sheila playfully offers a pinky swear to solidify the agreement. He dismisses her advances, sternly ordering her to return to her room before they are discovered. Sheila stands up to leave, her mind already calculating the risks of this new partnership. She steps out into the frigid winter morning, her breath hitching in the snowy air. A voice suddenly calls out her name, cutting through the silence of the garden. It's Enoch, appearing out of the shadows while walking his small dog. Sheila questions his presence so early, her internal alarm bells ringing for any signs of a spy. Enoch casually explains his routine, presenting himself as a harmless morning stroller. She offers a polite compliment on his pet, though her eyes remain sharp and observant. Enoch receives the praise with a friendly, unassuming expression. However, his tone shifts as he prepares to deliver a serious warning. He points toward the nearby wing of the manor, identifying it as his brother's private quarters. He leans in close, advising her to avoid the area because his brother is notoriously short-tempered. Sheila nods graciously, feigning gratitude for his supposedly helpful advice. She bids him a pleasant farewell, maintaining her flawless facade until he is out of sight. As she rushes back, she realizes she must reach her guest room before her absence is noted. Her path is blocked by Irene, a maid who stands in the hallway with a suspicious gaze. The maid demands an immediate explanation for where Sheila spent the night. Sheila claims she was performing her duties by tending to the Duke, keeping her voice steady. Internally, she realizes this servant is a planted spy tasked with tracking her every move. She stands her ground, challenging the maid's authority to question her whereabouts. Her eyes flash with a cold, aristocratic authority that demands respect. The maid remains undeterred, speaking with a level of insolence that borders on a direct threat. Sheila's patience wears thin as she glares at the servant who dares to cross her. The tension is broken by the arrival of Eugene and Eunice, who witness the standoff. Eugene steps in immediately, his expression darkening as he scolds the maid for her disrespect. Irene quickly tries to justify her actions, claiming her interrogation was born out of concern. Sensing the shift in power, the maid is forced to bow her head in a reluctant apology. Sheila watches her closely, knowing this small victory hasn't solved her problem. She realizes that a report of her disappearance will still reach the wrong ears, making her position even more precarious. Eugene stands firm, providing a calculated alibi by claiming he saw Clara leave her father's room the previous night. The maid, Irene, can only lower her head in a submissive posture as Sheila watches her with a look of cold suspicion. Internally, Sheila questions the motive behind Eugene's unexpected help, wondering why a stranger would lie for her benefit. Sensing the shift in power, Irene offers a forced apology, begging for forgiveness for her earlier insolence. Sheila's gaze remains icy as she warns the maid that she expects this to be the last time such an incident occurs. Irene keeps her eyes averted, promising that there will certainly be no repeat of her behavior. With a sharp command, Sheila dismisses the maid and announces her intention to return to her chambers. Irene stands silently in the corridor, watching the noblewoman walk away with a lingering sense of tension. Once they are alone, Sheila expresses her genuine gratitude to Eugene for stepping in when she needed it most. Eugene maintains his composure, assuring her that as an honored guest, she deserves nothing less than total respect. Back in the safety of her room, Sheila sits on the edge of the bed, her mind racing with the day's events. She clutches her gown, desperately trying to deduce who could have been responsible for drugging her. She mentally tallies her suspects: the cowardly Enoch, the overly friendly Eugene, and the watchful Eunice. Her train of thought is shattered by the rhythmic clicking of footsteps approaching her door. Startled, she demands to know who is outside while remaining grounded on the floor. The door swings open to reveal the Duke, who looms over the entrance with a predatory, self-assured grin. The realization hits her like a physical blow. The man standing before her is her future husband. Panic flares in her eyes as she wonders how he managed to bypass the lock on her door so easily. She forces herself to remain calm, questioning why the Duke has arrived at such an early hour. The Duke steps closer, invading her personal space while praising her for her supposed hard work throughout the night. He reaches out to present a dazzling blue gemstone, offering it as a reward for her dedication. Hyla plasters on a fake, radiant smile as she accepts the expensive gift with both hands. Her expression quickly shifts to one of sheer alarm as the Duke's behavior becomes increasingly aggressive. He stares her down, his face inches from hers, asking if she is unwilling to comply with his sudden demands. Desperate for a distraction, Hyla claims it is an inconvenient time of the month, hoping the excuse will drive him away. The Duke's smile turns sinister, his eyes gleaming with a dark intent that ignores her pleas. He ignores her cries for him to stop, gripping her arm with a strength that leaves her feeling trapped. Glaring up at him, Hyla realizes she may have to resort to lethal force just to survive the encounter. Suddenly, the door bursts open again, and Ulysses stands in the frame, interrupting the Duke's advances. Ulysses' presence is like a cold front, his eyes fixed on the scene with a chilling lack of emotion. Both Hyla and the Duke are frozen in shock at the son's unexpected intrusion into the private chambers. The Duke demands that Ulysses state his business immediately, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Unfazed, Ulysses reports that the family's private army expenses have increased and require immediate approval. Ulysses then mentions a massive sum of money sent by the Priestley family specifically for wedding expenses. At the mention of a large fortune, the Duke's eyes light up with greed, momentarily forgetting his previous focus. He releases his hold on Hyla, his mind now entirely occupied by the prospect of the incoming gold. Ulysses maintains his professional distance, claiming that Eugene is the one handling the specific financial handoff. The Duke smirks, deciding that the money is more important than his immediate impulses for the time being. As the Duke prepares to leave for official business, Hyla remains on the floor, bidding him a hollow farewell. The Duke brushes past Ulysses, his focus shifted entirely toward the family's growing coffers. Once his father is gone, Ulysses' expression remains sharp and intense, hiding his true thoughts behind a mask of indifference. Hyla looks up at him, asking if the story about the Priestley family's money was just a clever lie to save her. Ulysses reveals that the message actually came from Eugene, who seems to be watching over her from the shadows. He looks down at her, his face partially obscured by shadow, his tone becoming increasingly grave. Finally, he warns her that gratitude is a waste of time and offers her one last, fleeting chance to escape before the wedding. Hyla stands barefoot on the cold floor, weighing the heavy implications of being offered another chance at freedom. Ulysses looms over her with a cold gaze, questioning if he is being far too lenient with a woman of her reputation. Hyla fires back with a sharp retort, declaring that she no longer desires his pity or any further opportunities from him. Ulysses dismisses her bravado, warning her to stop boasting and focus on the arrival of the new maid sent by the Priestley family. The new maid, Hannah, stands with a rigid and stern posture as she presents herself for duty. Hyla observes the woman carefully, noting the air of hostility radiating from her. The two women lock eyes in a silent, tense battle of wills within the quiet room. Hyla breaks the silence by asking if she is indeed the replacement sent by Clara. Hannah snaps back instantly, reminding Hyla that a commoner like her has no right to speak her mistress's name so casually. Hyla's expression turns chilling as she mentions the fate of Molly, the last person who dared to speak to her with such arrogance. Hannah's composure cracks as she realizes Hyla is accusing her of having a hand in the previous maid's demise. The maid tries to regain control by threatening that the Priestley family will never allow Hyla to escape their grasp. Instead of showing fear, Hyla reaches into a drawer and pulls out a breathtaking, jewel-encrusted necklace. She stares at the glittering treasure, knowing exactly how to manipulate the greedy heart in front of her. Hyla dangles the fortune before Hannah's eyes, watching the light dance off the massive blue gemstone. Hannah is visibly shaken, struggling to maintain her loyalty while staring at a bribe worth more than a lifetime of service. Hyla casually tosses the expensive jewelry to the maid, framing it as a simple welcome gift for her new subordinate. She looks at the maid with a calculated gaze, promising even greater rewards if Hannah chooses the right side. Hannah clutches the necklace tightly, her resolve to serve Clara dissolving in the face of such wealth. The maid drops to her knees, pledging to send false reports to Clara to keep the mistress unsuspecting. The next morning, the grand dining hall is illuminated by a massive, golden chandelier as breakfast is served. Hyla enjoys the luxury of the Alcott estate, savoring every bite of the high-quality meal provided. She finds herself genuinely delighted by the rich flavor of the cream soup, momentarily forgetting the danger surrounding her. Despite the beautiful setting, the atmosphere at the table remains thick with unspoken tension between the nobles. Hyla comments on the beauty of the morning, trying to maintain her role as the perfect bride-to-be. Ulysses interrupts her thoughts by addressing her directly, causing her to pause mid-meal. He makes a subtle gesture toward his own face, indicating that she has been less than graceful while eating. Hyla quickly moves to wipe her mouth, her face flushed with sudden embarrassment at being caught off guard. She wonders privately if the prince has been intensely monitoring her every move throughout the entire breakfast. Ulysses looks away with a dark expression, convinced that Hyla is an utterly unpredictable and dangerous woman. The surrounding nobles exchange glances, intrigued by the unusually charged dynamic between the prince and the future duchess. Hyla clenches her fists beneath the table, publicly insisting that she and Ulysses share no personal connection. She tries to maintain a mask of indifference to hide the growing frustration she feels toward him. Sheila forces a thin smile, ignoring the judgmental stares coming from the other side of the long table. She stands to excuse herself, claiming she must prepare for the wedding dress fitting taking place in 2 days. Ulysses watches her retreat, marveling at her ability to maintain such a strong appetite while standing on the precipice of a forced marriage. Sheila storms through the hallway, internally cursing Ulysses for his constantly annoying and prying words. She thinks to herself that if a drug existed to permanently silence a man like him, she would buy it without hesitation. Suddenly, a voice calls out to her from the shadows, bringing her quick pace to a halt. Enoch approaches her with a somber expression, asking if she can spare a moment for a private conversation. He looks down, beginning to reveal the painful history of his upbringing within the Alcott family. Enoch explains that because his mother was of humble birth, he was always the least favored child, living in constant anxiety. Sheila looks at the young man with a touch of genuine pity, moved by his apparent vulnerability. Enoch looks up at her with shimmering eyes, asking if she truly finds his situation to be a tragic one. He steps closer, pleading for just a small spark of affection once she officially becomes his stepmother. Sheila is caught off guard by the sudden intensity of his emotional request and his close proximity. She maintains a professional distance, reassuring him that as the future mistress of the city, she will look after all the children. Enoch offers a soft smile in return, appearing to be comforted by her promise of care. As she turns to leave, Enoch's demeanor shifts instantly into something far more serious and focused. Sheila tries to hurry away, mentioning that she is on a very tight schedule for her wedding preparations. Enoch stops her once more, claiming he has a vital secret that can only be discussed in total privacy. He takes her by the arm and leads her deeper into the quiet corridors of the estate. Sheila asks him to release her hand, worried about the scandal if they are seen in such an intimate-looking position. Enoch quickly apologizes for his forceful behavior, though he does not let the tension drop. Sheila waits with bated breath, sensing that the young noble is about to reveal something life-changing. Enoch leans in and whispers the truth that changes everything. He knows exactly who drugged her at the banquet. Enoch leans in close, whispering the chilling revelation that Eugene's own maid was the one who poisoned her drink. Sheila offers a polite thanks while mentally bracing herself for the political minefield ahead. Needing an escape from the tension, she excuses herself under the guise of a wedding dress fitting. Back in her chambers, Hannah meticulously fastens the layers of an elaborate white gown. Sheila stares at her reflection, calculating how to navigate the lethal traps set by both Enoch and Eugene. Watching her mistress, Hannah feels a surge of genuine respect for the girl's quiet strength in the face of a forced marriage. The maid notices Sheila's internal struggle and offers to carry whatever burdens she can to prove her worth. Sheila seizes the moment to test Hannah's newfound loyalty with a high-stakes secret mission. She leans in with a cold gaze, ordering Hannah to report every single move Eugene makes immediately. Meanwhile, the Duke strolls through the halls, whistling a tune with a bottle in hand. He stops a passing maid, his presence immediately casting a shadow over the bright corridor. The Duke demands to know why the doors are barred, only to learn Lady Clara is inside dressing. A predatory grin spreads across his face as he decides to assist his bride-to-be personally. He bursts into the room without warning, catching Sheila completely off guard in her bridal attire. Panic flares in Sheila's eyes as she realizes she is cornered with no one to intervene. She quickly commands Hannah to barricade the door, while she prepares for a desperate escape through the window. Sheila scrambles toward the ledge, her heart hammering against her ribs as she looks for a way down. The guards force their way inside, knocking Hannah to the floor as Sheila vanishes into the estate. The Duke looms over Hannah, demanding to know where his beautiful fiancé has run off to. His expression turns dark and playful, relishing the thought of a twisted game of hide-and-seek. He prowls the dark hallways, his voice echoing as he calls out for Clara to show herself. He peers into a darkened room, his silhouette framed by the ominous light of the corridor. Hiding in the deep shadows, Sheila watches the Duke's terrifying search from a distance. She remains deathly still, cursing the old man's persistence as he checks every corner of the wing. Pressed against a cold door, she listens for the telltale sound of approaching footsteps. She slips into a dusty, abandoned study, hoping the neglected room will provide a safe sanctuary. As she explores the gloom, a sudden movement from the darkness makes her heart stop. Before she can scream, a firm hand clamps over her mouth, pinning her in place within the shadows. To her shock, she finds herself staring into the intense, steady eyes of Ulysses. Sheila clutches her chest, struggling to steady her breathing after the massive fright. Ulysses keeps his voice low, explaining he's searching for forgotten archives in the abandoned room. She eyes him with suspicion, wondering why the master of the house is sneaking around his own library so secretly. A heavy silence falls between them as Ulysses looks away, his expression becoming unreadable. He finally reveals he's searching for the truth behind his mother's mysterious passing. Ulysses shifts the focus back to her, asking point-blank why she's lurking in the shadows of this room. Hearing the Duke's voice nearby, Ulysses grabs her arm and leads her deeper into the maze of shelves. The Duke enters the study, his presence polluting the quiet air of the old library. He moves past the bookshelves, certain his little bird is nesting somewhere nearby. Ulysses pulls Sheila into a narrow crevice, their figures concealed by the towering stacks of books. Hyla's pulse quickens as she realizes the sheer proximity required for their tactical concealment. She decides to use this moment of forced closeness to test his boundaries and secure his loyalty. She leans closer, asking a pointed question about his past experiences to throw him off balance. Ulysses looks down, his stoic facade cracking as he admits to having absolutely no experience at all. Hyla is momentarily stunned by the raw honesty of the man standing before her. She narrows her eyes, preparing to go all out with her manipulation to ensure he remains under her thumb. Ulysses stares in disbelief, questioning Hyla's sanity while Ralph prowls just outside the door. Hyla remains remarkably calm, explaining that her risky gamble is the only way to ensure they are both tied to the same fate. Outside, the Duke searches the room with a predatory focus, sensing his prey is near. The Duke's taunting voice echoes through the wood as Ulysses tries to maintain his composure in the shadows. Ulysses firmly presses his hands against the cabinet doors, desperate to keep their hiding spot a secret. Seeing the tension in his eyes, Hyla realizes this is the perfect moment to test his true intentions. She leans in close, challenging him to admit why he hasn't already turned her in or ended her life. Hyla keeps her voice low, warning him that any sudden movement will result in his own immediate execution by the Duke. She maintains a strategic proximity, ensuring her words sink in as the danger heightens. The two hold their breath as a heavy thud vibrates through the small space. Ralph kicks the stubborn door in frustration, unaware that the target of his search is inches away. Annoyed by the resistance, the Duke grumbles that she must have fled elsewhere and prepares to leave. Hyla finally exhales, her eyes fluttering shut as the immediate threat of discovery fades away. Ulysses remains silent, his gaze fixed on her as he processes the intensity of their shared secret. He looks at her with a steady gaze, wondering if she truly believes he would let her face the Duke alone. Softening his expression, he asks for her real identity, wanting to know the woman behind the mask. Hyla is caught off guard by the request, her eyes widening as she hesitates to reveal the truth. Before she can reveal her secret, Ulysses leans in with a sudden, silencing gesture to prevent any nearby spies from hearing her true name. He pulls back just enough to look into her eyes, the weight of their alliance hanging between them. Hyla is left stunned and breathless by his abrupt maneuver to ensure their conversation remains strictly private. Ulysses reminds her with a smirk that her formal union with Ralph is scheduled for the very next day. He reaches for the door handle, signaling that their private meeting in the shadows has come to an end. As he steps out, he gives her one final look, telling her not to disappoint him in the coming trial. Hyla watches him depart, contemplating whether this dangerous pact will actually work in her favor. The scene shifts to the grand hall, where a glittering chandelier marks the beginning of the high-stakes ceremony. Ulysses stands among the guests, observing that Hyla carries the weight of the elaborate wedding gown with surprising grace. Nearby, other nobles watch the procession with a mix of pity and silent judgment for the young bride. The priest begins the formal rites, asking Ralph if he vows to take this woman as his wife. Ulysses watches intently from the sidelines, waiting for the pivotal moment of the ceremony to unfold. Ralph smiles with a sense of triumph as he reaches out to finalize the union with a gold band. Hyla forces herself to remain professional, focusing on material value of the ring to endure the Duke's touch. The priest officially pronounces them husband and wife before the entire congregation. As Ralph leans in to finalize the ritual, Hyla realizes she must endure one final, nauseating moment of performance. She quickly shifts the focus, addressing the Duke to break the tension of the ceremony. Ulysses steps forward on cue, presenting a special bottle of brandy commissioned specifically for the occasion. Ralph's eyes light up at the sight of the rare vintage, eager to celebrate his new acquisition. With a steady hand, Ulysses pours the celebratory drink for his father. Hyla's eyes sharpen with a hidden intent as she watches the liquid fill the Duke's glass. She scans the crowded room, knowing that every eye is on them as she prepares her final move. The dark wine sparkles in the light, masking the lethal secret hidden within the glass. Hyla raises her own glass to the Duke, formally acknowledging him as her husband in front of the court. She then turns to Ulysses with a calculating smile, offering a toast to her new stepson. They both drink in unison, their expressions unreadable as the plan enters its final phase. Ralph drains his glass with greedy satisfaction, completely unaware of the trap he just stepped into. The audience gasps in horror as the festive atmosphere is shattered by a sudden, violent collapse. Ulysses catches the Duke as he falls, while Ralph gasps for air, his life rapidly slipping away. The wedding hall erupts into chaos as guests whisper in terror, wondering how the Duke could possibly be poisoned in such a public display. Duke Ralph lies sprawled on the cold floor, coughing up blood, while the horrified nobility looks on in shock. Desperation fills the air as a nobleman screams for Dr. Edmund to intervene immediately. The Alcott family's private doctor, Edmund, rushes onto the scene with a look of grim determination. He quickly kneels beside the dying Duke, warning the bystanders that the man could choke on his own blood if he isn't positioned correctly. Amidst the panic, Ulysses holds a distraught Hyla, who plays the role of the grieving bride to perfection. While the world watches her tears, Hyla's inner coldness clashes with Ulysses' silent calculation as they wait for the next move. Edmund's face hardens as he confirms the grim truth: this was no accident, but a deliberate poisoning. Fortunately, the doctor is prepared, revealing an array of medical tools and antidotes to fight the lethal toxin. Eunice takes command of the room, ordering the guards to seal the banquet hall so the culprit cannot escape. Heavy doors slam shut, trapping the nervous guests inside for an immediate investigation. Panic spreads through the crowd as everyone realizes they are now suspects in a high-stakes assassination attempt. Hyla turns her tearful gaze toward Eunice, addressing her new stepmother with a voice trembling with feigned fear. Eunice remains cold, insisting that since Sheila and Ulysses serve the wine, they must be the first to be searched. Hyla weakly agrees to the search, her body appearing to give way under the immense stress of the situation. Suddenly, a violent cuff racks Hyla's frame as a spray of blood escapes her lips, shocking the entire room. Ulysses' eyes widen in genuine disbelief as he watches his co-conspirator collapse before his eyes. As Sheila falls, Ulysses realizes this is her ultimate gambit, poisoning herself to erase any shred of suspicion. The crowd's horror doubles as they realize the new Duchess has also fallen victim to the mysterious toxin. Ulysses suddenly feels the sting of betrayal in his own throat, coughing up blood as the realization of Hyla's double-cross hits him. He glares at her, his mind racing as he wonders exactly when she managed to slip the poison into their own glasses. Hyla offers a hidden, triumphant smirk, silently promising him that this move will keep them both above suspicion. Much later, Hyla's eyes slowly flutter open as she finally regains consciousness in the safety of her chambers. She is greeted by the gentle smile of Eugene, who has been watching over her with apparent concern. A nearby maid informs her that Eugene has been a constant presence at her bedside, refusing to leave all night. Hyla remains still, her mind sharp and analytical despite her weakened state. She wonders if Eugene's kindness is genuine, or if he is simply an observer sent to monitor her every move. Sensing her wariness, Eugene offers a reassuring smile, claiming his presence is born of care rather than surveillance. Hyla maintains her guard, knowing that in this house, every gesture of kindness has a hidden price. Eugene delivers the news. The Duke survived, but the poison has left him paralyzed and unable to speak a single word. Hyla absorbs the information, her expression remaining neutral while her mind celebrates the perfect outcome. With Ralph incapacitated, she realizes she now holds the true power as the mistress of the Alcott estate. She leans forward, asking with a voice full of fake urgency if the person responsible has been apprehended. Eugene explains that a maid named Sophia has been framed for the crime, accused of seeking the Duke's favor for herself. He adds that Eunice has already moved with ruthless efficiency, ordering the maid's immediate execution. Hyla thanks him for his protection but suggests he return to his duties as the eldest son during this crisis. Eugene takes her hand in a formal gesture of respect before finally departing the room. Hyla watches him go, her amber eyes glowing with a mix of curiosity and lingering doubt. Once the door is shut, Hyla turns to her loyal maid, Sheila, her tone shifting to one of cold business. Sheila steps forward, her expression confirming that the secret operation was a success. The maid reveals that Sophia was successfully rescued and spirited away, exactly as Hyla had planned. Under the cover of darkness, the former maid was guided through the city to a safe house beyond the Duke's reach. Hyla produces a letter of introduction and travel funds, ensuring the woman has a future far from the Alcott family. She hands the package to Sheila, trusting her to finalize the arrangements for Sophia's new life. Sheila turns to complete her task, her loyalty to Hyla stronger than ever. However, the maid pauses, unable to suppress a burning question about Hyla's motivations. She asks why Hyla would risk so much to save a commoner when letting her die would have been far safer. Hyla's gaze softens as she explains that as a commoner herself, she refuses to let betrayal be the only reward for service. Moved by her words, Sheila declares that Hyla possesses a nobility far greater than any titled lady she has ever known. Hyla playfully dismisses the praise, telling Sheila to hurry before she changes her mind about the expensive travel funds. Sheila departs with a light heart, leaving Sheila alone with her thoughts. But the maid's departure is cut short as she nearly collides with someone waiting in the shadows. Ulysses stands in the doorway, his cold gaze piercing through Hyla as he questions if she's finally finished with her theatrics. He stares her down with an intensity that suggests he knows exactly how deep her web of lies truly goes. Hyla stares blankly, wondering if the man who attempted to take her life has finally succumbed to the poison. She remains bedridden, mentally calculating the status of her enemies while she recovers from the ordeal. Outside the chambers, Hannah tries desperately to delay Lord Ulysses, insisting that her lady is still deep in slumber. Ulysses brushes past the maid with cold indifference, claiming he is merely there to perform his duties as a devoted son. Panicking, Hyla internally screams for her maid to stop him before her facade is blown. The door swings open and Hyla realizes she is completely trapped with nowhere to hide from his piercing gaze. Ulysses stares down at her with a look of absolute skepticism, seeing right through her supposed exhaustion. Hyla can only manage a nervous glance upward, realizing her acting skills are being put to the ultimate test. Ulysses commands her to stop the charade, forcing Hyla to drop the act and plead that her actions were born purely of survival. He leans in closer, his eyes narrowing as he dissects every word of her frantic explanation. Hyla is frozen as she realizes Ulysses has connected every dot of her plan, from the study to the wedding day. She shifts the blame with a smirk, reminding him that the tactical exchange of poison during their kiss was a shared moment. Ulysses calls her out for being incredibly thick-skinned, but Hyla doesn't even flinch. She reaches out to steady the situation, reminding him of her brutal upbringing in the slums, where shame was a luxury she couldn't afford. Hyla begs him to cut her some slack, while Ulysses firmly demands she release her hold on him. She closes her eyes with a mock-pitying expression, taunting him about his inability to handle a supposedly feeble woman. Frustrated by her antics, Ulysses can only sigh as Sheila dramatically collapses back onto her pillows. He delivers a final, sharp warning for her to cease her reckless schemes before they both end up ruined. Ulysses turns on his heel and exits the room, leaving Sheila to reflect on their tense encounter. Sheila watches him go with a knowing smile, sensing that his tough exterior hides a genuine concern for her safety. Now alone, she focuses her attention on the next obstacle, removing Eunice from her position of power within the manor. Dressed in her finest attire, Sheila prepares to implement the first phase of her plan by manipulating the paralyzed Duke. She stares into the flickering candle flame, hardening her resolve for the performance of a lifetime. Her expression shifts into one of deep sorrow, perfectly crafting the image of a grieving, devoted wife. Sheila slowly approaches the Duke's private quarters, her voice trembling as she calls out to her husband. She pauses at the threshold, ensuring every detail of her heartbroken appearance is in place. Inside, she finds Ralph struggling to communicate while Eunice hovers over him in a state of distress. Sheila observes the scene from the shadows, watching as the tension between father and daughter reaches a breaking point. A subtle, triumphant smile touches her lips as she realizes she has arrived at the perfect moment to intervene. Eunice snaps at her immediately, warning Sheila that family matters are strictly off-limits to an outsider like her. Sheila glides across the floor with grace, maintaining her composure despite the blatant hostility. She places a gentle hand on the desk, feigning worry for the Duke's fragile mental and physical state. Ralph watches them with wide, panicked eyes, his muffled protests ignored by the two women fighting for dominance. Eunice lashes out again, accusing Sheila of being a gold digger who only cares about the benefits of her new title. The daughter's face is twisted in a mask of pure rage as she tries to discredit Sheila's every move. Sheila lowers her gaze, playing the martyr by claiming that caring for Ralph is a sacred responsibility of her marriage. Eunice stares her down, her eyes brimming with a deep-seated hatred that no amount of acting can soothe. Seizing the opportunity, Sheila throws herself at Ralph's bedside, suggesting she should leave if her presence causes such a rift. Ralph's face contorts with sudden, intense emotion as he processes Sheila's calculated words. Before Eunice can react, the paralyzed Duke musters enough strength to roar a command for his daughter to get out. Ralph's face is a portrait of fury as he officially bans his own daughter from entering his room. Eunice stands frozen in the doorway, completely stunned by the sudden and total loss of her father's favor. As she leaves, Eunice's eyes burn with a promise of future vengeance against the woman who ousted her. Sheila's gaze turns and sharp, signaling that she won't be waiting for a counterattack. She is going on the offensive. Hannah later informs her that Eunice has organized a tea party for all the local noblewomen, specifically excluding Sheila. Sheila dismisses the move as a childish attempt at social isolation, refusing to let it rattle her. Suddenly, Ulysses appears before her, his presence commanding immediate attention. He takes a moment to observe Sheila, who looks every bit the powerful duchess she has become. Ulysses decides they will crash the party together, eager to see the look on Eunice's face when they arrive uninvited. He maintains a stoic profile, trying to convince himself that he is only doing this to keep her out of trouble. With a purposeful stride, Ulysses leads the way, ready to shake up the social order of the estate. The noble women of the north gather in the parlor, their teacups clinking as they gossip about the mysterious new duchess they've only seen from a distance. Eunice sits at the head of the table, wearing a mask of polite concern that hides her sharp, malicious intentions. She feeds the guests a blatant lie, claiming the new duchess is a fragile girl currently hiding in her room in tears, unable to handle the northern lifestyle. The guests erupt into mocking laughter, trivializing Sheila as nothing more than a child who is completely unfit for her new responsibilities. Eunice basks in the success of her smear campaign, savoring her tea with a self-satisfied smirk as the others mock her rival. Her smugness vanishes instantly when her eyes snap open to see Sheila herself calmly crashing the party. Eunice's expression hardens into a glare as her plan to isolate the duchess falls apart in real time. Quickly masking her annoyance, Eunice offers a pastry with a fake smile, attempting to regain control of the social narrative through condescension. Sheila stands tall beside her maid Hannah, maintaining her composure despite the snickering of the surrounding nobles. Seeing Hannah's visible frustration at their rudeness, Sheila offers a subtle, knowing look, signaling that the real game is only just beginning. From the shadows of the hallway, Ulysses watches the confrontation with a sharp, calculating gaze. He wonders if Sheila is truly prepared to navigate the shark-infested waters of northern high society without his intervention. Sheila makes her move, unfurling a series of exquisite handmade lace shawls that radiate a level of luxury rarely seen in the north. One of the guests stares in awe, her resolve to ignore the duchess wavering at the sight of such fine craftsmanship. Eunice scoffs at the display, desperately trying to convince the room that these southern luxuries have no place in their territory. Hannah holds the precious cargo with professional poise, acting as the perfect silent partner in Sheila's social gambit. Sheila plays the part of the dejected wife, sighing dramatically as she prepares to return to the Duke's side. As she adjusts her hair, she purposefully reveals the Alcott ancestral ring shining brilliantly on her finger for everyone to see. The noblewoman gasps in shock, recognizing the legendary heirloom that none of the Duke's previous wives were ever permitted to wear. Eunice's face contorts with rage as she realizes the devastating power of the symbol Sheila is now flaunting. A sharp, desperate accusation cuts through the air, signaling the end of the polite facade. Eunice leaps to her feet, screaming that Sheila must have stolen the ring from her paralyzed father. The guests lean in closer, the atmosphere turning predatory as the scandalous rumor of theft begins to circulate through the room. Sheila remains perfectly calm, placing a hand over the ring and inviting them to confirm its origin with the Duke himself. Eunice freezes in place, realizing she has no way to verify her claim without facing the father, who has already grown cold toward her. Sheila leans in with a chillingly polite smile, preparing to deliver the final killing blow to Eunice's social standing. She reminds the entire room that the Duke was so displeased with Eunice that he officially banned her from even entering his room. Eunice points a trembling finger in a desperate, angry outburst, but her authority has already been shattered. The surrounding noblewomen exchange looks of realization, sensing that Eunice has officially fallen out of favor with the household's master. Sensing the shift in power, one guest immediately abandons Eunice to beg Sheila for one of the exquisite lace shawls. The rest of the ladies follow suit, swarming Sheila with requests and leaving Eunice standing completely alone. Eunice stands paralyzed by the sudden betrayal, watching her lifelong social influence evaporate in an instant. Sheila watches the feeding frenzy with cold eyes, fully aware that interest, not loyalty, is the only currency that matters in this court. Ulysses steps out to meet her as she leaves the room, his skepticism replaced by genuine intrigue at her performance. He acknowledges her tactical brilliance in dismantling Eunice's power base with such surgical precision. However, he remains deeply suspicious of the secret methods she used to gain the Duke's absolute trust so quickly. Sheila walks through the manor with newfound authority, the social victory already behind her as she focuses on her next move. She offers a final, professional nod to the remaining guests as she concludes the afternoon's business. Turning her back on the socialites, she heads toward the garden to address more pressing matters. Spotting Ulysses in the distance, Sheila calls out to him, refusing to let the regressor ignore her presence any longer. Ulysses stops in his tracks, turning to face her with a mixture of annoyance and professional curiosity. Sheila asks him directly about the Duke's personal preferences, seeking more technical leverage for her ongoing manipulation. Ulysses looks away, maintaining a cold distance as he claims he has no interest in his father's personal affairs. Sheila teases him with a mischievous look, suggesting she'll simply find someone else to provide the information she needs. The thought of her turning to other men in the household visibly irritates Ulysses, his composure momentarily slipping. He suddenly reaches out, gripping her arm firmly to prevent her from walking away before he gets the answers he wants. Ulysses looms over Sheila, demanding to know which brother she's truly trying to manipulate. Sheila shoots back with a sharp smirk, asking if he's simply jealous of her approaching other men for her own benefit. He dismisses her tease instantly, claiming he's only worried her reckless behavior will blow their cover and drag him down. Sheila's hand rests near her chest as she realizes this man truly doesn't have a single pleasant word to offer. She stares him down with unwavering resolve, promising that if she fails, she'll take the fall entirely alone. Ulysses remains unconvinced, demanding she reveal every detail of her secret plans for the Duke's son. He leans in close, pressuring her to explain exactly what she did to Ralph to secure the family ring. Sheila closes her eyes with a weary sigh, feigning that the technicalities of the Duke's care are just too difficult to explain. Ulysses isn't buying the act for a second, ordering her to physically demonstrate exactly what transpired with the Duke. Realizing she can't talk her way out of this one, Sheila reluctantly agrees to reenact the scene for him. She begins the demonstration by reaching out and gently placing her gloved hand over his. She mimics the focused motions of a therapeutic massage she performed to soothe the Duke's paralyzed arm. Her fingers trail up toward his neck, recreating how she carefully tended to Ralph's physical needs. She looks him directly in the eye while holding his arm, maintaining a strictly professional and technical focus. Ulysses watches her with a suspicious intensity, questioning if she really agreed to every demand the Duke made of her. Sheila is taken completely aback when he suggests she used her mouth, shocked by his wild and dirty assumptions. He looks genuinely disturbed by his own thoughts, struggling to process the idea of her being that close to the old man. She laughs off his ridiculousness, clarifying that she only used her mouth to feed the Duke wine, not for anything else. She sighs at the absurdity of the situation, realizing the stoic Ulysses has a surprisingly overactive imagination. Sheila considers how she might eventually need to discipline his nonsense-spouting mouth for such insults. Suddenly, their tense standoff is cut short as the sound of footsteps interrupts their private conversation. Eugene arrives in his wheelchair, accompanied by a maid, catching the two of them in a very compromising position. He addresses Sheila with a formal mother, his expression unreadable as he observes the two of them together. Ulysses stands his ground, looking down at his elder brother with a cold and defensive posture. Eugene ignores ignores the tension radiating from Ulysses, stating he has urgent matters to discuss with Sheila in private. Sheila dismisses the need for secrecy, insisting that Ulysses is no longer outsider to her plans. Eugene is visibly surprised, wondering exactly when the relationship between these two became so close. He stares intensely at Sheila, trying to decipher the true intentions behind this sudden and powerful alliance. His gaze remains heavy and analytical, sensing that the power dynamic in the Alcott house has shifted forever. Eugene warns her that the eldest lady is already looking for ways to put Sheila back in her place. Sheila remains completely unfazed, confident that she has already secured her revenge against those who oppose her. Eugene advises her to be far more cautious, reminding her how treacherous and complicated this family can be. Sheila rejects the advice outright, declaring she prefers to take the initiative and solve all problems head-on. Eugene sighs at her stubbornness, worried that her youthful confidence will lead her straight into a dangerous trap. Ulysses finally interjects, questioning if Eugene is truly acting out of concern or for his own hidden agenda. The two brothers lock eyes in a silent, bitter battle of wills over who truly understands Sheila's situation. Eugene gives up on his attempt at persuasion, deciding it's best to leave the final decision to her. He begins to wheel himself away, leaving a lingering sense of unease hanging in the garden air. Sheila watches him go with a subtle smirk, amused by the clear friction between the Duke's sons. Ulysses turns to her with a chillingly calm expression, having reached a new and mocking conclusion. He bows with theatrical flair, addressing her as mother with a sharp and predatory glint in his eyes. Sheila shivers as he walks away, feeling a sudden, genuine chill from his unsettling and possessive tone. Elsewhere in the estate, a porcelain teacup shatters against the floor in a fit of unbridled rage. Eunice seethes with anger while Eugene attempts to pacify her rapidly failing patience. She refuses to listen to his excuses any longer, her mind already racing with dark thoughts of vengeance. She turns her back on her brother, completely finished with playing the role of the helpless victim. Eunice vows to find a powerful outside ally who can help her finally crush Sheila's growing influence. In the dead of night, the laboratory is filled with mysterious concoctions as the shadows deepen. Dr. Edmund carefully prepares a chemical solution, his focus completely unwavering. The doctor's concentration is suddenly broken by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Eunice steps into the dim light of the lab, her presence immediately commanding attention. She offers the doctor the one thing he needs most: unlimited funding for his experimental research. Edmund stares in disbelief, questioning if such a lucrative offer could actually be real. Eunice makes it clear that this financial support comes with a very specific, high-stakes condition. She orders the doctor to modify Sheila's medicine to ensure she becomes completely docile and compliant. With a chilling gaze, she emphasizes her desire for total control over the Duchess. Sunlight breaks over the estate the following morning as Ulysses prepares for the day's tasks. Dr. Edmund arrives for Sheila's scheduled checkup, followed closely by an attentive maid. Ulysses watches the doctor with a cold, piercing suspicion that something is fundamentally amiss. Butch Stark notices his master's distraction and asks if something is weighing on his mind. Ulysses dismisses the concern, though his thoughts remain fixed on the doctor's suspicious movements. The sharp sound of clashing training swords soon echoes throughout the courtyard. Ulysses pours his frustration into his swordsmanship, moving with lethal, calculated precision. He recalls the unsettling look in Edmund's eyes during their earlier encounter. A sudden wave of dread washes over him, signaling that Sheila might be in immediate danger. He abruptly halts the training session, shocking his sparring partner with the sudden stop. Butch stands frozen in confusion at the abrupt change in his master's demeanor. Without a single word of explanation, Ulysses sprints back toward the main manor. Butch calls out after him, wondering why the session was cut so short. A panicked maid bursts into the hallway, screaming for immediate assistance for the lady. She spots Ulysses and frantically pleads for him to intervene. She explains that Sheila has suddenly collapsed and is now in a critical state. Horror flashes across Ulysses' face as the weight of the news hits him. He charges into Sheila's quarters, fearing the absolute worst has happened. Sheila lies motionless on the floor, her face pale and stained with what appears to be blood. Ulysses immediately sweeps her into his arms, demanding a carriage be readied for another doctor. He barks orders to have Edmund detained until he returns to settle the matter personally. The carriage thunders away from the estate in a desperate race against time. Inside the cabin, Ulysses holds Sheila steady, his protective instincts in overdrive. He whispers words of encouragement, urging her to hold on just a little longer. His concern turns to confusion as he examines the strange, waxy texture of the blood on his skin. He quickly realizes the blood is actually a clever application of cosmetic pigment. Sheila suddenly sits up with a playful grin, revealing her elaborate ruse to his annoyance. Ulysses stares in disbelief, realizing he was completely deceived by her dramatic performance. Sheila explains that she needed a public way to escape the doctor's watchful eye. She recounts how she had previously investigated Edmund and discovered his hidden, unstable nature. During the checkup, she had remained sharp and carefully tested the medicine he provided. Edmund had tried to lie about the updated formula, confirming her suspicions of foul play. She reveals how she secretly disposed of the spiked tonic before faking her unconscious state. With a bright smile, she admits she also wanted to see if he would actually worry about her. The raw honesty of her admission leaves Ulysses momentarily speechless and stunned. He leans in close, trapping her against the carriage wall to reclaim his composure. He coldly claims his only concern was the logistical trouble her death would cause his plans. Ulysses looks away, his face flushed as he struggles to maintain a professional distance. Sheila continues to tease him, thoroughly enjoying the shift in their intense dynamic. They share a moment of extreme proximity, reinforcing the strength of their technical alliance. Outside, a loyal hound barks loudly as the carriage passes through the estate gates. A hand reaches down to calm the dog as the carriage speeds toward its destination. Eugene watches the departing vehicle from a distance, sensing that the bond between them is growing far too strong. The carriage races through the dense forest as Sheila and Ulysses deal with the aftermath of their high-stakes performance. Their sudden physical proximity creates an undeniable tension. As they process the shift in their complex relationship, Ulysses finally pulls back, signaling that their impromptu lesson in deception has reached its limit. Sheila is left breathless, questioning how he could be so skilled if he truly lacks experience in such matters. Ulysses maintains a cool composure, claiming he simply never viewed the masked socialites of the court as anything more than objects. In his eyes, the noble women of his past were merely soulless trophies hiding behind elaborate facades. Sheila narrows her eyes in skepticism, finding it hard to believe that such talent could be entirely unpracticed. Ulysses retorts with a smug confidence, suggesting that some people simply don't need practice to master the basics of a performance. Sheila realizes she has met her match in a man who holds a grudge just as fiercely as she does. Suddenly, the frantic voice of a maid shatters the heavy atmosphere inside the carriage. Sheila quickly pulls back the curtain to find Hannah looking pale with visible worry. The maid delivers a devastating warning. Young Master Enoch witnessed their encounter and has run to the Duke to report them. A heavy silence falls over the pair as they realize the precariousness of their current position. Sheila quickly regains her footing, betting on the fact that the Duke has never favored the boy enough to believe him without proof. Despite the risk, they agree that returning to the manor immediately is their only viable option to control the narrative. Sheila knows that any slip-up will be devoured by the other branches of the Alcott family waiting in the shadows to strike. The carriage pulls up to the imposing manor where the day's true trial is about to begin. Standing side by side, Sheila and Ulysses prepare to face the consequences of their public actions. They find Enoch already standing before the Duke and Eugene, looking ready to deliver a final blow. Sheila can tell from the room's suffocating atmosphere that the boy has already spilled his secrets. Ulysses grits his teeth, surprised that someone he considered a spineless coward would actually have the nerve to betray them. Eugene steps forward with cold efficiency, assuring the Duke that he will personally manage the investigation. Sheila prepares her mental script, ready to play the ultimate victim and deny every word of the boy's testimony. She looks Eugene in the eye, daring him to ask the questions she is already prepared to lie about. To her surprise, Ulysses steps firmly in front of her, taking the brunt of Eugene's icy gaze. Instead of an accusation, Eugene speaks with feigned concern, suggesting that the Duchess might be too traumatized to speak clearly. Sheila and Ulysses share a bewildered glance, completely blindsided by Eugene's unexpected tone. It turns out Enoch didn't mention the carriage at all. He only reported Dr. Edmund's attempt to poison Sheila. Sheila realizes that the boy intentionally omitted the scandalous details to focus purely on the doctor's betrayal. She looks at Enoch, realizing he might have just proven his loyalty by choosing a side in this dangerous game. Seizing the opportunity, Sheila prepares to turn this unexpected twist into a weapon against her enemies. The tension in the room is palpable as the family gathers to witness the fallout of the failed assassination attempt. Sheila collapses into a fit of dramatic sobs, clinging to Ralph and begging for justice against the man who tried to kill her. She hides her face behind her hands, putting on a show of vulnerability that would put any stage actress to shame. Watching from the side, Enoch can't help but think her over-the-top acting is actually quite terrible. Ignoring the drama, Eugene commands Ulysses to bring the captured doctor into the room for immediate questioning. The heavy thud of boots echoes through the hall as the disgraced medic is dragged before the Duke. Dr. Edmund looks up in a daze, his face pale as he realizes the magnitude of his failure. He freezes in horror upon seeing Sheila sitting perfectly healthy and untouched by his lethal concoction. Edmund stammers in disbelief, insisting that his poisons have never failed to claim a victim before today. He is forced to his knees, trembling under the weight of the Duke's silent and terrifying fury. Eugene looms over the traitor, demanding the name of the person who paid for the Duchess's life. With a twisted grin, Edmund prepares to expose the one who truly pulls the strings in the manor. Standing in the shadows, Eunice watches her plot crumble, her true nature finally exposed to the light. Eunice stands frozen as the weight of the accusation finally settles on her shoulders. Eugene leans in with a piercing gaze, demanding to know if she truly lost her mind enough to order the doctor to poison their stepmother. The young man's face contorts with a mix of disbelief and authority as he corners his sister. Desperate to save herself, Eunice frantically waves her hands, claiming she only asked for sedatives, and that the doctor must have misunderstood. She casts a sharp, pleading look toward the bound Dr. Edmund, silently ordering him to play along with her lie. Edmund stares back in pure shock, his mouth hanging open at the sheer audacity of her betrayal. With a cold and elegant flick of her hand, Eunice dismisses his unspoken protest, acting as if the entire ordeal is beneath her. The doctor can only gape in silence, realizing he's been completely thrown under the bus by his co-conspirator. Nearby, Eugene remains composed while the Duke rests, taking full command of the messy family affair. Hyla watches the Duke carefully, noting that while everyone knows Eunice is the mastermind, the family will likely prioritize peace over true justice. Sensing the political shift, Hyla realizes she won't get a harsh punishment for Eunice, so she decides to pivot her strategy toward a different kind of profit. She stands tall before the group, ready to turn this attempted assassination into a massive payday. With a bright, almost innocent smile, Hyla casually demands 50,000 gold coins as compensation for her trauma. Eunice's composure shatters instantly, her face twisting in rage at the astronomical price tag. Before another argument can break out, Eugene steps in to accept the terms on Eunice's behalf to avoid a public trial. He maintains a strictly professional demeanor, effectively settling the debt to protect the family's reputation. Hyla can barely contain her inner glee, already dreaming of the immense power her new fortune will buy. When Eunice tries to protest the payout, Eugene sharply reminds her that Hyla is the Duchess and has every right to manage the estate's staff and finances. Hyla offers a satisfied smirk, impressed by how well the eldest son can read the room when money is on the line. Seeing the tides turn, Dr. Edmund immediately grovels at Hyla's feet, swearing his absolute loyalty to her from this day forward. Hyla looks down at him with a calculating gaze, realizing a spiteful doctor could be a very sharp tool to use against Eunice later. Ulysses remains skeptical, leaning in to ask Hyla if she truly believes they can trust a man who just tried to kill them. Hyla officially grants Edmund one more chance, while Eunice stands in the background, fuming over her total loss of control. A close-up of Eunice's eyes reveals a burning resentment, as she vows that Hyla's luck won't last forever. Soon after, a heavy sack overflowing with shimmering gold coins is delivered to Hyla's quarters. Hyla's loyal maid stares at the fortune in disbelief, overwhelmed by the Duchess's sudden and massive wealth. The maid beams with joy, promising to dedicate herself even more fervently to Hyla's service. However, the maid can't help but ask why Hyla is so intent on winning over Lord Ulysses when their relationship remains so strictly formal. Hyla gazes out, her mind drifting back to the harsh lessons she learned surviving in the slums. She vividly remembers how the devoted would often be the first to abandon others when real danger appeared. She also remembers the cold and ruthless types who, once won over, would become an unbreakable shield for those they valued. Hyla lets a single gold coin spin across the table, comparing the weight of that loyalty to Ulysses' stoic nature. She catches the coin firmly, her decision made about how to handle the man who currently holds the power in the city. Resting her chin on her hand, Hyla plots her next move to ensure Ulysses elevates her to the highest position in Blizzard City. A subtle, knowing smile plays on her lips as she envisions her ultimate rise to the top. The scene shifts to the serene, sun-drenched gardens of the manor. Hyla strolls through the greenery, deciding that giving Ulysses the cold shoulder for a few days will make him crave her attention even more. Her quiet reflection is interrupted by a voice calling out to her from the shadows of the pavilion. She finds Eugene waiting for her, his expression serious as he requests a moment of her time in private. Hyla keeps her back turned, coldly informing him that she has no interest in hearing any more of his friendly warnings. As she begins to walk away, Eugene's composure breaks, and he desperately calls out for her to wait. The sudden movement causes a frantic stir in the garden, catching Hyla off guard. Eugene looks up at her, his face showing a rare moment of vulnerability and genuine emotion. Hyla turns back, appearing like a radiant vision as the sunlight catches her hair and dress. It's revealed that Eugene is severely nearsighted, and without his glasses, Hyla has always been nothing more than a colorful blur to him. Now, seeing her features clearly for the very first time, the young master is left completely breathless and stunned. Eugene remains on the ground, his voice trembling as he warns Hyla not to approach any further. Hyla gazes down at him, her eyes filled with a sharp challenge as she asks if he's truly incapable of standing on his own. The weight of her words hits him hard, forcing him to look down at the legs he's considered useless for years. A wave of melancholy washes over his face as he retreats into the painful memories of his past. In his mind, he sees a simple pinwheel, a toy that once represented a life of movement. He remembers the sunny days when he and Eunice would race through the fields without a care in the world. Back then, his legs were strong, carrying him swiftly through the tall grass. A younger, vibrant Eugene smiled with pure joy, chasing after the prize. Eunice would tease him, sticking her tongue out as she stayed just out of reach. But the game took a dark turn when Eunice lost her footing on the uneven terrain. Without a second thought, Eugene lunged forward, desperate to catch her before she hit the ground. The cost of that rescue was high, leaving nothing but a shattered pinwheel in the dirt. From that moment on, his world was confined to the cold, dark silence of a wheelchair. The light left his eyes as he realized his life had been permanently altered. He lived under the shadow of Eunice's guilt, as she forbade anyone from even mentioning his condition. She would fly into a violent rage, lashing out at any servant who dared to speak of the accident. In the present, Eugene's knuckles turn white as he grips his wheelchair, the physical reminder of his confinement. Every fundamental action, running, walking, and jumping, is a freedom that has been cruelly crossed out of his life. The haunting image of his younger self serves as a constant reminder that he is truly trapped. He looks up at Hyla, his expression hollowed out by years of silent suffering. Sensing the shift in atmosphere, Hyla softens her tone and offers a rare apology apology for her bluntness. Eugene accepts the gesture and asks if she could help him transition back into his chair. She reaches out, firmly grasping his arm to provide the necessary support for the transfer. As she pulls, she is caught off guard by the sheer amount of muscle hidden beneath his sleeves. She realizes he must be training in secret, holding on to a flicker of hope that he might walk again. Sheila looks him directly in the eyes and declares with absolute certainty that he will stand on his own 2 feet. Eugene is stunned by her conviction, his hand lingering on the arm she just held. The effort leaves Sheila slightly winded, though she tries to maintain her composure after the heavy lift. She takes a moment to catch her breath, her face flushed from the physical exertion. With a playful yet demanding glare, she tells him he better put in the work, because she refuses to haul him up a second time. Eugene stares at her in disbelief before a genuine smile finally breaks across his face. Sheila can't help but burst into laughter, the tension between them finally evaporating. Feeling a new sense of purpose, Eugene promises to give his absolute best effort from now on. Later, Sheila turns her attention back to her duties, reviewing documents with a professional air. She observes her surroundings with a keen, analytical gaze, ensuring everything is in its proper place. Her aide is surprised by how quickly the Duchess is taking charge of the household staff. Outside, Ulysses stands motionless near the window, watching Sheila from a distance. His companion notes that the Lord has been frozen in place for an eternity, seemingly unable to look away. Suddenly, the attendant has a spark of inspiration to bridge the gap between them. He boldly knocks on the window glass, catching the attention of those inside. Sheila and her maid turn in shock to see Ulysses hovering right outside the room. Sheila is bewildered, wondering why on earth the high and mighty Ulysses is resorting to knocking on windows. Ulysses finally relents and marches toward the entrance, his boots clicking sharply against the floor. The maid greets him warmly as he steps into Sheila's private space. He stands before Sheila, trying to maintain his usual stoic and imposing presence. Sheila remains seated, coolly asking him what business could possibly bring him here. Ulysses hesitates, his composure slipping as he struggles to find a valid reason for his visit. His shock deepens when he realizes Eugene is already there, looking peaceful and composed. Eugene offers Sheila a stunning bouquet of flowers, expressing his gratitude for her recent help. Ulysses watches the exchange with a dark, smoldering gaze, clearly agitated by the unexpected competition for Sheila's attention. Ulysses stands with a skeptical expression, questioning what great favor Sheila could have possibly done for Eugene to deserve such public praise. Eugene smiles warmly as he recounts how Sheila went through a great deal of effort to help him back into his wheelchair after an accidental fall. Sheila sits gracefully with her new bouquet, while Ulysses watches her from behind with a sharp, calculating gaze. Ulysses turns his head away, his expression darkening as he contemplates Sheila's growing influence over his brother. Sensing the tension in the room, Sheila puts on a playful smile, deciding to stir the pot and add a little more fuel to the fire. Ulysses is visibly flustered when Sheila mentions how long she spent closely assisting Eugene during his physical recovery. Sheila thanks Eugene for the roses, and he eagerly offers to provide them for her whenever she wishes, despite the icy weather. Looking down at the floor, Ulysses wonders why such a simple gift would bring her so much genuine happiness. Ulysses reaches into his coat, ready to present something far more substantial than a mere flower to get her attention. He pulls out a stunning, jewel-encrusted brooch and presents it to a stunned Sheila. Sheila is caught off guard as Ulysses explains that the precious item is simply an advance payment for a future favor he requires. Eugene leans forward in his chair, immediately recognizing the heirloom that Ulysses has just handed over to the Duchess. Ulysses coldly dismisses his brother's observation, insisting that Eugene must be mistaken about the brooch's origin. Sheila stares at the shimmering gem, sensing there is a much deeper history behind the gift than Ulysses is letting on. Ulysses tells her to put the jewelry away and demands she meet him at the training grounds the following day for his request. As the eldest son turns to leave, Sheila is left alone, puzzled by the mysterious and secretive behavior. Eugene watches Ulysses depart, noting that his brother has never been this proactive with anyone before. Holding the brooch up to the light, Sheila realizes that both brothers seem to share a sudden interest in gaining her favor. Eugene remains silent, his face a mask of quiet determination as he plots his next move in the household. Eunice bursts into the room, fuming after hearing from the maids that Eugene gave flowers to their supposed enemy. She reminds her brother that she is the only one who truly looks out for him, her voice trembling with frustration. Eunice pleads with Eugene to hate Sheila, unable to understand why he would show her any kindness or respect. Eugene calmly explains that no one's position is permanent, and he intends to turn Sheila into a valuable ally for their cause. He suggests that by being more likable than the gloomy Ulysses, he can secure Sheila's loyalty for himself. Eugene gently places his hand over his sister's, trying to soothe her volatile emotions with a calm touch. With a look of newfound purpose, he asks for her support as he pursues the goals he has finally set for himself. Eunice looks away, her anger fading into a somber realization of her brother's resolve. Relenting to her brother's wishes, Eunice decides she will find a way to make amends with the Duchess. The next morning, Sheila arrives at the bustling training grounds, watching the guards undergo their rigorous drills. She feels out of place among the soldiers, wondering why Ulysses insisted on meeting in such a public setting. Suddenly, Sheila stops in her tracks, her eyes widening at the sight of the training session in progress. Ulysses is in the middle of a high-intensity workout, focused entirely on perfecting his sword technique. Hyla quickly covers her face in embarrassment, while the nearby maid admires the young master's dedication to his physical fitness. Trying to regain her composure, Hyla tells herself that she's seen plenty of athletic training sessions before, and this is no different. She recalls a previous occasion where Ulysses's strictly professional routine was equally impressive to witness. Despite her nerves, Hyla can't help but peek through her fingers to observe his progress with the blade. Ulysses continues his sparring session with a wooden sword, showing no signs of slowing down despite the cold. He catches a glimpse of Hyla in the distance, a subtle look of satisfaction crossing his face as he notices her arrival. Fueled by her presence, Ulysses executes a series of powerful strikes against his training partner to demonstrate his skill. As Ulysses finishes his set and heads toward her, Hyla tries to hide behind her maid's shoulder to avoid his gaze. She peeks out cautiously, completely unprepared for how quickly the young master has closed the distance between them. Hyla quickly offers a garment to cover his exposed frame. She averts her gaze, demanding he dress himself immediately to maintain decorum. Clutching the heirloom brooch, Hyla prepares herself for a difficult conversation. Ulysses stands with an air of confidence, his physique a testament to years of rigorous military training. As he dons his shirt, he notices Hyla's obvious discomfort with his casual display of strength. The Duchess is left visibly flustered, while Ulysses remains entirely unfazed by the awkwardness. Hyla refocuses the conversation, asking for clarification on the assistance he requested earlier. She recalls hearing rumors about specialized physical maintenance techniques popular in the city. She suggests that such conditioning methods are highly regarded among the local nobility. Hyla is momentarily stunned when he expresses a blunt desire to utilize those very methods himself. Ulysses looks back with a cold, questioning stare, wondering why his request would be an issue. Panicking, Hyla waves her hands and insists he can do as he pleases if it helps her mission. She beat a hasty retreat, leaving the confused commander standing alone in the training grounds. Later, a maid interrupts Hyla's research to announce that Eunice has arrived for an unexpected visit. Hyla looks up from her book with a sharp, suspicious glare, questioning the girl's sudden presence. Eunice enters with a forced smile, presenting a decorative gift box as a peace offering. Hyla remains skeptical, noting how rare it is for her rival to show such uncharacteristic kindness. Despite her doubts, she grants Eunice entry to see what game is truly being played. The two women sit in a tense silence, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken agendas. Eunice offers the gift, claiming it contains rare specialties from Hyla's distant home of Lion City. Hyla's eyes light up with sudden intensity as she demands to know exactly where these items were sourced. Eunice is taken aback by the Duchess's aggressive interest in a simple merchant. Hyla masks her true intentions by claiming she simply misses the comforts of her homeland. Eunice maintains her polite facade, secretly pleased that her deception seems to be working. Hyla eventually tracks down the merchant, a weary-looking man with a weathered cap. She presents him with a specific list of rare materials required for her maintenance project. The merchant scans the paper with a knowing look, questioning if she is certain about these specific items. With a subtle wave of his hand, he signals for Hyla and her escort to follow him deeper into the market. The group moves into a secluded, shadowy corner far from the prying eyes of the public. The merchant pauses at the entrance of a dark warehouse, claiming the supplies are kept within. Hyla steps into the dim, foreboding room, her intuition finally beginning to flare. Her maid looks around the pitch-black interior, sensing that something is terribly wrong. A sudden movement in the darkness causes the maid to gasp in alarm. Reacting instantly, the maid shifts into a defensive stance to shield Hyla from the shadows. Hyla looks over her shoulder, realizing they have walked straight into a calculated dead end. Three menacing thugs emerge from the gloom, blocking their only path to safety. The maid bravely confronts the attackers, warning them that they are threatening the Duchess herself. The lead thug lets out a chilling laugh, revealing that they knew her identity from the very start. The realization hits Hyla that their royal status offers no protection in this lawless trap. She quickly deduces that Eunice orchestrated this entire encounter to lead her into an ambush. Instead of showing fear, Hyla stands tall and calmly proposes a negotiation to the surrounding criminals. The lead thug lets out a confident sneer, certain he has the Duchess cornered in his trap. Hyla remains remarkably composed, offering to double whatever bounty their mysterious employer promised. The criminals burst into mocking laughter, dismissing her as a mere trophy wife with no real power. She counters their insults by claiming her status as a daughter of the priestly family grants her massive personal savings. The thugs loom closer, their shadows engulfing the two defenseless women. Her maid panics at the bold bluff, but Hyla quietly whispers the truth. She doesn't actually have a single cent. With a sharp, calculating gaze, Hyla reveals she is simply stalling for time until her backup arrives. Earlier that day, Hyla had approached Ulysses to request secret protection for her suspicious market excursion. Suddenly, the heavy, rhythmic thud of a polished boot echoes through the warehouse. Ulysses looms in the doorway, casting a shadow of pure, lethal intent over the room. The lead thug's face pales instantly as he recognizes the terrifying man standing before him. To common criminals, Ulysses is a literal demon rumored to swallow people whole without leaving a trace. The thugs immediately drop to their knees, begging for mercy and swearing they never laid a hand on the Duchess. Ulysses ignores their desperate pleas, coldly ordering his subordinate to clear the trash from his sight. A gag is shoved into the leader's mouth to silence his pathetic cries for forgiveness. The once arrogant thug is dragged out of the warehouse like a common sack of grain. Sheila lets out a long sigh of relief, teasingly asking what took her protector so long to show up. Ulysses questions if she finally understands the concept of fear after pulling such a reckless stunt. He looks down at her with a soft, knowing gaze that belies his ruthless reputation. He reaches out, his fingers gently brushing against her hair in a rare moment of quiet reassurance. Sheila's cheeks flush a deep crimson as she stares up at him, her heart skipping a beat. She quickly regains her focus, asking about the whereabouts of the merchant who betrayed her. As they walk, Ulysses notes that the merchant has already confessed to being Eunice's pawn. Sheila confronts the bound merchant, Adam, confirming that Eunice is scheduled to meet him for the final payoff. She offers the terrified man his freedom, provided he carries out one specific retaliatory task for her. The merchant sets up his stall in the busy market square exactly as instructed. He scans the passing crowd with a nervous eye, waiting for the young lady to make her appearance. His eyes finally lock onto his target as she weaves through the bustling street. Eunice arrives in her finest gown, fully expecting to celebrate Sheila's social downfall. Nearby, a man disguised in tattered rags carries a bucket filled with foul, fermented slop. Eunice walks with a haughty, arrogant stride, completely unaware of the trap Sheila has set. She smiles to herself, relishing the thought of her brother being disgusted by Sheila's ruined reputation. In a split second, the bucket is tipped over, drenching the noble woman in a wave of disgusting waste. Eunice stands frozen in absolute horror as the putrid stench of the slop fills the air. She screams in a fit of rage, demanding to know which peasant dared to ruin her expensive attire. The smell is so overwhelming that Eunice begins to gag and heave uncontrollably in front of the public. Onlookers watch in visible disgust, mocking the high-born lady for her undignified and stinking state. Completely humiliated, she tries to hide her face from the judgmental glares of the commoners. She turns and flees the market in a panic, desperate to escape the eyes of the city. Back at the safety of the estate, Sheila carefully stirs a pot of boiling lilac wax for her next project. She and her maid share a laugh over the reports of Eunice's spectacular social disaster. The maid reports that Eunice is now hiding in shame, too afraid to even face Master Eugen. With the revenge mission complete, Sheila puts the finishing touches on her new aromatherapy oil. She prepares the concoction for a technical maintenance session, intending to test its effects on Ulysses. A small candle burns steadily, releasing the potent, calming scent of lilac into the room. Sheila sits closely beside Ulysses, monitoring his physical reaction to the experimental treatment. Ulysses' breath hitches as he feels an intense, burning sensation suddenly course through his veins. He seizes Sheila's hand in a firm grip, demanding to know exactly what kind of powerful oil she used on him. Ulysses questions if Sheila truly doubts his capabilities after her suspicious maintenance requests. Sheila stares back with wide eyes, challenging him to prove his words with action. The tension breaks as Ulysses demands she leave his quarters immediately. He turns his back, dismissing her without further discussion. Sheila exits as white feathers drift through the silent hallway. She looks down dejectedly, her elaborate gown shimmering in the dim light. Ulysses firmly grips the handle to lock the door behind her. He stands alone, frustrated by the lingering atmosphere of their encounter. Sheila buries her face in a pillow, lamenting her failed attempt at persuasion. Her maid arrives, encouraging her to study more effective social techniques. The maid presents a massive stack of books to help Sheila master her role. Sheila opens a manual focused on irresistible interpersonal influence. She finds the detailed contents surprisingly enlightening as she reads. Overwhelmed by the complex instructions, she covers her face in a moment of embarrassment. A servant rushes in, announcing that the Duke is in a state of rage. Sheila stands up, ready to face the urgent summons. Inside the Duke's chambers, a porcelain cup shatters across the floor. Sheila enters as the bedridden Duke looks up with desperate eyes. The Duke demands to know why she hasn't visited his bedside recently. Sheila rushes to him, feigning deep emotional distress over absence. She clings to him, accusing Eunice of orchestrating a horrific kidnapping attempt. Sheila displays fake wrist marks to frame the daughter for the thug's actions. The Duke trembles with fury, vowing to punish his rebellious child. Sheila watches him with a calculated expression of vulnerability. She hesitates, pretending to be too afraid to ask for further help. She finally pleads for a personal guard to handle Eunice's interference. Her eyes sharpen as she plots to seize military authority for herself. The Duke takes her hands, easily agreeing to provide the protection she seeks. He immediately orders his staff to summon Ulysses to the room. Sheila notes the Duke's extreme caution despite his frail health. The Duke instructs Ulysses to protect Sheila and discipline Eunice. Ulysses stands tall, accepting the official command while Sheila remains demure. Outside, Ulysses leans in close to Sheila, questioning her latest scheme. Sheila smiles softly, reassuring him that her focus remains purely professional. Sheila mocks Ulysses, leaning in to question his unexpected lack of fear. Ulysses stares back with an intense, unreadable gaze. He recalls a childhood of neglect and harsh words from his father. Sheila is stunned when he suddenly pulls her closer. The Duke barks orders from his sickbed, breaking the tension. Sheila struggles to break free from his firm grip. She desperately threatens a mutual demise if he doesn't release her. The Duke commands them both to handle Eunice's discipline immediately. Hyla complies, hiding her thoughts on the Duke's fading mind. Servants whisper about the sudden shift in the mansion's hierarchy. Guards seize a frantic Eunice in the courtyard. Hyla and Ulysses arrive to oversee the official punishment. Eunice screams in defiance, banking on her status as the eldest. Hyla dismisses her pleas with cold, unwavering authority. The guards force Eunice to the ground as she shrieks. Her face contorts in raw, tearful agony. Panic sets in as she realizes her power is truly gone. The executioner prepares to deliver the strike. Eunice looks up in absolute terror. Eugene arrives in his wheelchair, calling for a halt. Eunice begs her brother for salvation. Eugene takes in the grim scene before him. He asks Hyla to let him take Eunice's place. Hyla is visibly taken aback by his self-sacrificing request. Ulysses watches the interaction with a grim expression. He steps forward, his presence commanding the space. Ulysses hauls Eugene away, refusing to let him interfere. He harshly reminds Eugene that this city has no room for pity. Eugene looks away, resigned to the cruel reality. The whip cracks down as the punishment begins. Eunice watches, horrified, as her brother suffers for her. Hyla remains impassive, watching the discipline unfold. She offers a celebratory drink, but Ulysses coldly declines. Hyla notes his hurried departure with growing suspicion. She decides to tail him to see where he's going. Ulysses stands alone at a grave amidst the rain. The headstone bears the faded image of his mother. He gently places a bouquet of flowers on the stone. Kneeling, he apologizes for using her as a pretext. He reflects on his hidden past and the secrets he keeps. He remembers discovering the truth about his mother's suicide. The memory of her final, tragic jump haunts him. He admits his long-standing resentment for her abandonment. His expression softens as his thoughts turn to Hyla. He recalls his first glimpse of her in the frozen wilderness. Her sheer will to survive struck a chord within him. He wishes his mother had possessed that same fire. He confesses to the grave that he must protect her. Hyla hides nearby, shocked by what she's overheard. She tries to slip away before being spotted. Ulysses' sharp senses immediately detect her presence. He catches her by the shoulder, demanding to know how much she heard. Ulysses looms over Hyla with a piercing gaze, demanding to know exactly how much of his private vow she overheard. He leans in dangerously close, his voice dropping to a low warning, as he tells her not to let him catch her in a lie. Hyla frantically raises her hand, swearing an oath to the gods that her ears caught absolutely nothing of his secret. Ulysses turns his back to her with a cold, stoic expression, leaving Hyla bewildered by his sudden spike in hostility. She imagines a scenario where she mocks his secret affection, picturing him defeated and kneeling before her as her most loyal servant. Or perhaps she wonders if she should be moved to tears by the idea of their hearts being in perfect, tragic sync. Watching him stand in somber silence, she realizes he might actually be mourning the mother he lost far too soon. Ulysses looks away, admitting with a heavy heart that he envies the small amount of time she actually got to spend with her mother. Hyla gazes at the ground, remembering the painful day her own mother simply abandoned her to the world. She recounts her grim childhood, being passed around between orphanages like a piece of unwanted, discarded furniture. A memory flashes back of her younger self tirelessly scrubbing floors under the harsh, judgmental eyes of a maid. She recalls the freezing nights spent huddled in a hay-filled shed, seeking any warmth she could find among the animals. The shadows of her past return, showing her trembling in fear while being scolded and loathed by those meant to care for her. Ulysses abruptly cuts her off, unable to endure hearing another word of her heartbreaking history. Hyla looks away with a sigh, feeling a bit slighted that her attempt at emotional bonding was so harshly rejected. He reaches out and gently touches her face, telling her that she should never reopen her old scars just to please someone else. She stares at him in stunned silence, finally realizing that he actually feels a deep sense of pity for her. Ulysses signals for her to follow him, deciding that it's time to move on from this heavy atmosphere. He looks back with a rare, soft expression, inviting her to his quarters to share a drink and celebrate their progress. The two walk together through the sun-drenched meadow, leaving the gravesite and their tragic memories behind. They raise their glasses in a professional toast, clinking them together to celebrate their successful cooperation. Ulysses takes a long, determined drink of the wine, appearing far more focused on the task than usual. Hyla sips her drink with a calculated look, secretly planning to outlast him during this intense networking session. She maintains a bright, cheerful demeanor as the two continue their technical discussion over the expensive vintage. They refill their glasses once more, the atmosphere growing more relaxed as the celebration continues. More bottles are brought out to ensure the professional evening doesn't end prematurely. Eventually, the strength of the alcohol begins to take its toll, leaving them both in a lighthearted, dizzy haze. Hyla reaches out to steady herself, her coordination failing as she insists she can handle one more glass. She stands up with a wobbly grin, her resolve to stay sober quickly crumbling. Ulysses leans in to assist her, noting her obvious state of intoxication as she tries to explain her next moves. He catches her as she stumbles, leaning close to steady her during her sudden dizzy spell. Outside the chamber, Eugene arrives in his wheelchair and knocks softly, hoping to discuss urgent matters with Ulysses. He waits in the hallway, his hand hovering near the door as he wonders why there is no immediate answer. His expression shifts to one of pure confusion as he hears muffled, incoherent sounds coming from inside the room. Eugene's eyes widen in absolute shock when he recognizes his stepmother's voice participating in the private meeting. He slowly pulls his hand back, stunned that such a secret gathering is happening right under his nose. Behind the door, Ulysses remains focused on helping the dazed Sheila recover from her overindulgence. Eugene bites his lip in a moment of silent agony, feeling the weight of a betrayal he can't quite name. He clenches his jaw and grips his wheelchair, overwhelmed by the realization that he has been excluded from their inner circle. Eugene visits the bedside of the injured Eunice, witnessing firsthand the heavy toll of their recent failures. She looks up at him with wide, fearful eyes, still visibly shaken by the harsh punishment she endured. Eugene finally breaks his silence, admitting with heavy regret that his past decisions were a grave mistake. Eunice reminds him of his own suffering, noting the scars he now carries on her behalf. He clenches his fist in frustration, blaming his own past complacency for their current downfall. A cold, sharp resolve settles over him as he adjusts his glasses, preparing for a total shift in strategy. He vows to seize the position of family head immediately to ensure Ulysses can never threaten them again. Eunice is momentarily stunned, realizing Eugene's new plan surprisingly includes protecting their stepmother as well. He explains his belief that Sheila is merely a victim of Ulysses's coercion and must be liberated from his influence. Secretly, Eunice decides to play along for now, knowing this alliance is her best shot at reclaiming power. A dark, calculating expression crosses her face as she prepares to turn her enemies into stepping stones. Elsewhere, Sheila and her maid clink glasses in a private toast, celebrating the successful formation of their new tactical pack. Sheila clarifies the situation to her confidante, insisting that her bond with Ulysses is strictly professional and devoid of sentiment. She recounts how Ulysses made it clear that while they are allies, his heart remains completely off-limits. Hannah questions if her mistress truly feels nothing for the cold guard who now stands by her side. Sheila stares into her wine with a somber expression, knowing that in their world, survival is worth more than fleeting emotions. She grips her glass with ironclad determination, focusing her entire being on the acquisition of wealth and status. The quiet moment is interrupted by a sudden knock, signaling an unexpected visitor at the door. Enoch stands outside, clutching a document with a look of pure urgency written across his face. He steps into the room, eager to deliver news that could shift the balance of power in the household once again. He reveals the shocking news that Eugene has reached out to their powerful grandfather to secure the dukedom. Sheila immediately processes the threat, realizing that the battle for the family's future has officially escalated into a war. Enoch admits his absolute terror of Ulysses prevents him from delivering this message to the guard directly. Sheila finds it curious that everyone around her views the man as such a monstrous and terrifying figure. She narrows her eyes, scrutinizing Enoch's every movement for any hidden sign of deception. Sensing her intense gaze, Enoch begins to panic, terrified that his loyalty is being called into question by the Duchess. Standing before her youngest son, Sheila maintains a composed exterior as the boy questions if she truly doubts his intentions. Enoch flashes a bright, innocent smile, seemingly relieved that his mother still trusts his loyalty. Sheila closes her eyes for a brief moment, masking her true thoughts as she listens to him pledge his absolute devotion to the family's strength. She maintains the facade of a caring mother, gesturing for him to enjoy some tea, while she steps away to handle more pressing matters. As she turns her back to leave, her expression shifts from maternal warmth to cold, calculating precision. Her eyes sharpen with a predatory glint, realizing that in this house, everyone is a player in a dangerous game of survival. Behind her, Enoch calmly sips his tea, though his presence serves as a constant reminder of the shifting loyalties within the mansion. Sheila reaches for the cold metal handle of Ulysses' office door, ready to discuss their next tactical move. She stands tall in her elegant gown, her silhouette framed by the golden light of the hallway. With a gentle shove, she cautiously pushes the door open, unsure of what state she will find her enforcer in. Her gloved hand lingers on the doorframe as she prepares to enter the lion's den. She steps into the room with practiced grace, her footsteps muffled by the heavy carpets. To her surprise, the formidable Ulysses is slumped over his desk, momentarily caught in a rare moment of exhaustion. Sheila leans in closer, observing the man who serves as the iron fist of her administration. She stares down at him, wondering how such a terrifying figure can look so peaceful in repose. Ulysses stirs and looks up, his sharp features illuminated by the desk lamp as he immediately snaps back into a professional posture. He turns his gaze toward her, his eyes reflecting a silent acknowledgement of her presence and the weight of their alliance. Sheila quickly dismisses any personal sentiment, waving her hand to refocus the conversation entirely on their shared professional interests. Getting straight to the point, she leans against the table to detail the throws by Eugene's latest move with Count Ellington. Ulysses remains unfazed, his expression hardening as he reveals that his web of informants has already relayed the news. His hand rests firmly on the table, a physical manifestation of the absolute control he maintains over the estate's security. He sets a bottle of wine down with a decisive thud, signaling that the time for passive observation has ended. With a dark look in his eyes, he suggests a lethal solution to remove the obstacles standing in their way. Sheila stands perfectly still, her mind racing as she realizes Ulysses intends to frame their enemies for a high-profile murder. Accepting the grim necessity of the plan, she takes a glass of wine, cementing their dark pact. They stand side by side, two ruthless architects of a new order. Ready to do whatever is necessary to secure the inheritance, Hyla offers a chillingly playful gesture of praise, acknowledging that his cold-blooded efficiency is exactly why she chose him as an ally. Ulysses watches her with a stoic intensity as she prepares to depart, his mind already calculating the logistics of the coming coup. Hyla exits the room with a sweep of her red hair, leaving the enforcer alone with his thoughts and his wine. The next morning, the sun beats down on the imposing stone towers of Blizzard City as a high-stakes arrival begins. Count Ellington, the formidable maternal grandfather of Eugene, marches forward with the air of a man who owns the ground he walks on. Hyla meets the veteran noble head-on, her vibrant red dress standing out against the backdrop of the massive courtyard. The Count looks her up and down with blatant disrespect, questioning her right to hold the title of Duchess. Hyla doesn't flinch, her gaze remaining steady and sharp as she offers a magnanimous but icy greeting. She makes a bold power play, demanding that the Count show proper fealty by kissing her hand in front of the gathered witnesses. From the sidelines, Ulysses and Eugene watch the confrontation, each gauging the strength of the woman standing between them and the dukedom. Eunice watches from the shadows, her face twisted in a scowl as she witnesses Hyla's sheer audacity. Realizing he has been outmaneuvered in this public forum, the Count begrudgingly bows his head to perform the formal gesture of respect. As he takes her hand, he leans in to whisper a veiled threat, warning her of the consequences of making the wrong choice. Hyla stares back with a look of absolute defiance, making it clear that she is not a woman who can be easily intimidated. Count Ellington narrows his eyes, insisting that his warning isn't a threat, but a cold reminder of the power he wields. Enoch watches the tense exchange from the sidelines, his expression unreadable as the political pressure mounts. Hyla offers a mockingly graceful response, closing her eyes as she thanks the Count for his supposed kindness. Her gaze snaps open with lethal intensity as she declares that she has already seen the city's true future and made her choice. Ellington looms over her, his voice dripping with condescension, as he hopes she can maintain that confidence after his meeting with the Duke. The two power players brush past one another, leaving a trail of icy friction in their wake. Enoch remains behind, internally questioning what dark leverage Ulysses used to force a woman like her into such total public submission. Eugene steps forward to escort Hyla, signaling that it's time for them to join the unfolding drama inside. As they walk away, Eugene's mind is fixed on the horizon, convinced that his path to the dukedom is finally clear. Standing alone, Enoch's frustration boils over as he tightly clenches his fist against his side. He silently vows to find a way to tear her away from Ulysses's manipulative grasp, no matter the cost. The group moves through the palace grounds, where festive banners flutter in a cruel contrast to the grim schemes being hatched. Hyla and Eugene enter the dim corridors, their silhouettes framed by the watchful presence of the palace guards. Eugene leans in close, reassuring Hyla that every piece of his plan has been meticulously set in motion. Clutching her dress with a mixture of anticipation and steel, Hyla prepares herself for the final confrontation. Inside the master chambers, Ellington stands like a grim reaper over the bed of the frail and ailing Duke Ralph. Ralph stirs from his stupor, his voice cracking with shock at the sight of the man who has avoided this room for years. Ellington looks down at his son-in-law, his face a mask of bitter resentment and long-buried grief. The Count's eyes cloud over as he dwells on the memory of his precious daughter, Bella, whom he lost to this family. He vividly remembers her wedding day, a time when she was a radiant bride full of hope and life. That memory shifts into a nightmare, recalling the agonizing moment he held her hand as she withered away on her deathbed. In the present, Ellington's hand trembles with a mix of sorrow and the burning need for restitution. He remembers the heartbroken faces of his grandchildren, Eugene and Eunice, who were left adrift after their mother's passing. Steeling his resolve, Ellington stands tall, cutting a sharp figure against the Duke's bedside. With cold, calculated precision, he demands that the Duke formally abdicate his position immediately. Ralph's face contorts into a mask of pure, indignant rage at the audacity of the request. Hyla observes the explosion of tempers, realizing that Ulysses accurately predicted this inevitable clash. The Duke bellows from his pillows, reminding Ellington that being ill is a far cry from being dead. Ellington doesn't flinch, arguing that since Eugene is the inevitable heir, an early transition is simply logical. He delivers a final, crushing ultimatum, asking if Ralph is willing to lose the Ellington family's vital support just to cling to power. Ralph gasps for air, his face turning a sickly shade of red as he realizes he is being backed into a corner. The Duke points a shaking, accusatory finger at Ellington, his heart racing beneath his chest from the sheer stress. Suddenly, his strength vanishes, and his hand goes limp, dropping uselessly toward the edge of the bed. Ralph collapses entirely, the force of his fall sending the bedside table and its contents crashing to the floor in a spray of glass. The room erupts into chaos as the witnesses stare in paralyzed horror at the Duke's motionless body. A doctor rushes to the fallen ruler, desperately checking for a pulse as the onlookers crowd around in shock. The physician looks up, his face pale and slick with sweat as he realizes the gravity of the situation. Eugene stares at the scene with a chillingly calm focus, watching his father's life slip away. The doctor performs a final, grim check on the Duke's unresponsive eyes and failing breath. A heavy silence falls over the room as it becomes clear that the master of Blizzard City is gone. Eunice and Enoch are overcome with disbelief, their faces twisted in grief at the sudden loss of their father. Hyla watches with a look of staged or genuine terror as the doctor officially pronounces the Duke dead. The doctor explains that the Duke's intense surge of anger caused a fatal rupture in his weakened blood vessels. Ellington stands amidst the mourning family, his stoic expression offering no comfort to the grieving children. Seeing her opening, Hyla points a trembling finger at Ellington, loudly accusing him of being the one who truly killed the Duke. Count Ellington stands stunned by the sudden, heavy accusation. Hyla points a finger, pinning the Duke's fatal collapse on the Count. Ulysses steps forward, calmly blocking the Count from leaving the scene. With a cold gaze, Ulysses declares the Count a prime suspect in the murder. Ellington scoffs, warning the young man against overstepping his current role. The Count shouts for his guards to enter the room immediately. He looks toward the door in confusion when no one answers his call. Hyla questions why his reinforcements are nowhere to be found. Ulysses offers a mockingly helpful clap to summon the assistance he needs. Armed estate guards fill the hall, effectively surrounding the Count. Eunice gasps as she realizes they have walked into a pre-planned trap. Ulysses dismisses the claim, calling the ambush a routine training exercise. The Count's party recognizes the obvious lie but remains powerless to stop it. Ulysses orders the guards to take the suspect into custody. Eunice rushes forward, demanding to know who gave Ulysses this authority. Ulysses counters by suggesting they intentionally provoke the Duke's death for the title. Ellington silences his granddaughter before she can further incriminate them. The Count clenches his fist, realizing he cannot win this confrontation now. Eunice protests the detention, fearing the capital offense charges. Eugene agrees to a joint trial to determine the actual truth. Eunice departs to notify the other noble houses of the emergency. The guards begin escorting the Count away for investigation. Eugene watches silently as the Count is led out of the chamber. The atmosphere shifts as the immediate threat is finally removed. A servant acknowledges the prince as the room begins to clear. Hyla collapses against the bed, continuing her performance of intense mourning. Ulysses offers his support, advising her to rest after the tragedy. He physically supports the Duchess as they prepare to exit the room. Eugene narrows his eyes, carefully observing the pair's close coordination. He watches them leave, noting how seamlessly they work together. Eugene wonders if Hyla is acting out of genuine loyalty or fear. He clenches his fist, refusing to believe she would willingly choose Ulysses. He vows to reclaim the title and remove Ulysses from power. Hyla maintains her weeping facade until they reach a private area. The door shuts, finally shielding them from any prying eyes. Hyla instantly drops the act, complaining about the exhaustion of faking tears. She asks if her stepson will assist with her physical tension. Ulysses steps behind her to begin a professional shoulder massage. Hyla wonders if his helpfulness stems from the successful framing. She notes his permanent poker face despite their tactical victory. Ulysses looks down, accurately reading her suspicious internal thoughts. Hyla quickly deflects, attempting to find a safer topic of conversation. Ulysses confirms his confidence in pinning the guilt on the Count. Hyla asks about the future fate of Eugene once he loses inheritance. Her tone grows somber as she considers the possibility of execution. Ulysses leans in to maintain a direct, professional focus on the discussion. Hyla questions the strategic wisdom of their bold movements, so soon after the Duke's passing. The two conspirators remain in close proximity, finalizing the details of their plan to seize total control. Hyla realizes that Ulysses' intensity is fueled by a deep-seated possessiveness over their professional alliance. She accepts her status as his most vital partner, hiding a knowing look beneath her hair. Ulysses stares her down, asserting that he views her as his exclusive domain within this power struggle. Hyla meets his gaze with a sharp challenge, reminding him that her loyalty is contingent on his continued success. The following morning, a maid urgently rouses the Duchess from her sleep to face the day's crisis. Hyla is caught off guard by the news that the city's noble heads have already assembled at the council hall. Sensing the urgency, she immediately orders her staff to help her prepare for the appearance of a lifetime. The massive doors of the council chamber are thrown open, signaling the start of a high-stakes confrontation. An announcement rings through the hall, formally heralding the arrival of the Duchess to the proceedings. Hyla enters the room draped in a somber mourning gown, projecting an image of stoic authority. She walks down the grand aisle as every noble in the city watches her every move. Eugene acknowledges her presence with a cold greeting, his suspicion palpable as she takes her place. Hyla stands perfectly still, maintaining her composure under the heavy scrutiny of the gathered lords. Eugene takes the floor, declaring his mission to uncover the true cause of his father's death and restore order. A senior lord proposes a neutral medical examination to confirm the findings of the previous report. The suggestion gains immediate traction as another official voices his formal agreement. Ulysses remains entirely unbothered by the proposal, staring ahead with a chillingly calm expression. Hyla watches him closely, drawing confidence from his lack of concern regarding the upcoming opsi. She remains silent and observant, knowing the next few minutes will determine the future of the dukedom. With no objections raised, the council orders the medical examination to begin at once. The lead doctor focuses his professional attention on the task, preparing to examine the evidence. The heirs and nobles watch with bated breath as the technical procedure unfolds in the center of the hall. The doctor finally pulls back the covering, indicating that his investigation has reached its conclusion. The room falls into a deathly silence as the doctor prepares to deliver the verdict that could destroy them all. The medical examiner delivers the final verdict, confirming that the Duke's body shows no signs of poison or foul play. Eunice and Eugene are left reeling as the official cause of death is revealed to be nothing more than a fatal outburst of anger. One of the lords trembles in guilt, realizing his heated argument may have been the final straw for the Duke's heart. Eunice refuses to accept the findings, lashing out at the doctor for what she perceives as a gross oversight. The tension in the room reaches a breaking point as the physician tries to maintain order amidst the chaos. Desperate to clear her family's name, Eunice begs the assembled lords to seek a second medical opinion. Hyla cuts through the noise with a sharp tongue, questioning if Eunice cares more for her maternal grandfather than her own father's honor. Stunned by the Duchess's cold logic, Eunice finds herself unable to form a coherent defense. Ulysses calmly reminds his sister that every doctor present has reached the same unanimous conclusion. The council members express their deep offense at having their loyalty and integrity questioned so openly. Eugene realizes that his position is slipping, and he must make a decisive move to maintain the Lord's favor. He commands his personal guard to take Count Ellington into custody. Following the strict protocols of the inquiry, Eunice is horrified by the betrayal, screaming at her brother for turning against their own kin. Eugene firmly grips her arm to stop her from escalating the scene further in front of the council. He leans in to whisper a cold truth, explaining that this move is necessary to stabilize the family's succession rights. Eunice gazes at him with a mix of fear and confusion, beginning to grasp the weight of the political game they are playing. Seeing no other way to survive the coming storm, she finally yields and agrees to trust his strategy. Watching the drama unfold, Hyla hides a calculating smile behind her handkerchief, amused by the predictability of noble loyalty. A prominent noblewoman rises to offer her condolences, signaling the end of the formal investigation. Ulysses stands with a stoic expression, publicly mourning the loss of the man whose power he is set to inherit. Outside the manor, the staff moves with somber efficiency to prepare the grounds for the upcoming funeral ceremony. Hyla takes a moment of solitude in the garden, feeling the physical toll of maintaining her composure all day. Ulysses approaches her with rare concern, suggesting she take a break while he handles the remaining logistics. She complains about the stiffness in her back, blaming the long hours of standing for her current discomfort. Ulysses looks down with a hint of internal conflict, perhaps feeling responsible for the heavy workload he's placed on her. He offers to help alleviate her muscle tension with a professional massage technique he once learned. They move to a private study where a floral arrangement sits quietly on a gilded side table. Ulysses begins the therapeutic session, applying firm pressure to Hyla's shoulders to work out the stress-induced knots. Hyla lets out a sharp breath as the intensity of the treatment catches her off guard. He pauses immediately, looking down to ask if the physical therapy is becoming too much for her to handle. Hyla reaches up to guide his hand, indicating the specific area that requires more focused attention. Despite the exhaustion, they maintain their professional focus on the recovery session as the fireplace crackles in the background. Meanwhile, the guests are ushered through the corridor toward the waiting room where they will reside until the funeral. A young attendant leads the group toward the door, ensuring the lords are comfortable during the transition. The lords gasp in shock as they push open the door, stumbling upon a scene they were never meant to witness. Enoch stands frozen in the doorway, his face pale with shock at the compromising scene unfolding before him. One of the lords erupts in a self-righteous fury, demanding the Duchess be banished immediately for what he perceives as a shameful act. The noble's tirade is cut short by the terrifying sound of steel being drawn, forcing the group to recoil in sudden fear. Ulysses steps forward with lethal grace, positioning himself as a human shield for Hyla, while leveling his blade at the intruders. Hyla remains silent, her eyes casting downward as the heavy weight of the confrontation hangs in the air. Enoch and the advisors exchange nervous glances as they are ordered to seal the room and remain inside. With a trembling hand, the young master complies, clicking the door shut to lock the witnesses away from the public. Ulysses towers over the trapped nobles, demanding their absolute silence and cooperation for just a few moments longer. The gray-suited lord protests violently, accusing the strategist of trying to force them into a false narrative through intimidation. Ulysses offers no verbal explanation, only a cold, predatory stare that warns the man to hold his tongue. Hyla watches the exchange carefully, realizing her partner is waiting for the environmental hazard in the room to take hold of their audience. Moments later, the nobles begin to stumble, their faces flushing as the airborne toxin finally reaches their systems. Ulysses remains perfectly composed, stating flatly that the room has clearly been compromised by a dangerous chemical agent. He tightens his grip on his sword, ensuring that no one forgets who holds the ultimate authority in this tense vacuum. Panic spreads through the group as they realize they have all been exposed to the same suspicious substance. Enoch frantically fumbles with the door handle, desperate to provide ventilation for the gasping lords and clear the air. Ulysses maintains his professional mask, claiming they were fortunate to have been interrupted before the chemical effects worsened. Internally, Sheila can't help but marvel at how convincingly Ulysses plays the role of a concerned protector to manipulate the situation. Faced with the physical evidence of the toxin, the lords quickly agree to disperse and investigate this breach of security. Suddenly, Baron Perez steps forward, raising a hand to halt their retreat before they can leave. He sharply questions the narrative, suggesting that the trap was actually a calculated play by Ulysses to secure his own position. Ulysses stands his ground, pointing out that no one would be foolish enough to stage such a high-risk scenario in such a public space. Perez refuses to back down, insisting on an immediate search of the private quarters for any incriminating evidence. Sheila counters with cold logic, warning the assembly that a fruitless search will result in severe legal consequences for those making the accusation. The advisors hesitate, realizing that a failed investigation during the funeral proceedings could permanently ruin their own reputations. Ulysses prepares to deliver his final ultimatum to the room, but the tension is suddenly broken by a new arrival. Reginald Ralph, the Duke's formidable half-brother, strides into the room with an aura of absolute command. Enoch rushes to his uncle's side, clearly relieved to have a senior family member intervene in the chaotic dispute. Reginald stands tall as he listens to the conflicting reports regarding the technical hazard and the resulting accusations. He closes his eyes for a long moment, weighing the political stability of the duchy against the claims of the lords. Sheila braces herself, fearing that Reginald will use the scandal to dismantle their hard-won influence over the estate. To everyone's shock, Reginald declares the matter closed, siding with the Duchess to protect the family's image from further gossip. The noblewoman quickly agrees to the truce, eager to escape the suffocating and suspicious atmosphere of the room. Without another word, the group of lords finally retreats, leaving the power couple alone to recover. Ulysses offers a formal word of thanks to Reginald for his decisive and stabilizing leadership during the crisis. Sheila finally makes her exit, escorted back to her chambers as the adrenaline from the confrontation begins to fade. Safely inside her room, she dismisses her staff, needing a moment of absolute isolation to process the day's narrow escape.